Welcome back, everyone. Hey, so we in the last couple of weeks, I've tried to have different experts in different areas come on, and then you guys remember we had Nick Cosman on, we had Tai Lopez on, and they talk about their different areas of expertise when it comes to sales, because that's one thing I really do want a lot of my clients and a lot of my fans to be able to do is if you guys want to grow your own business, you need to understand the scalability of it. You need to understand if your dream is to run a 7-figure, 8-figure business, there are ways to do this in 2022 that are incredibly efficient. So today, since we had Nick on and he was talking about sales letters, and we had Tai Lopez on and he was talking about paid traffic and brand building, I got a man on here who's talking about sales, a hardcore seller right here. He's the founder of Closer.io, and he is, as far as sales recruiting and sales training, he's worked with 4,000 different businesses. Really excited to have him on the podcast today. Please welcome Mr. Cole Gordon. How you doing today, sir?
Happy to be here, man.
Awesome, man. So, I was watching all the stuff that you were doing. It started off with the videos where you're talking about dealing with objections, which I thought was really awesome. We're going to get into that really quick, but Closer.io, can you explain what is that?
So basically, it's actually two companies. So within Closers.io, which is the holding company, there's Sales Team Accelerator, which is a company that basically recruits and trains salespeople, places them in organizations, mainly in the information publishing industry, and then helps them build the sales team. So it's kind of a hybrid between we were the first person to not just be a recruiting agency, but that kind of blended with a consulting firm for sales teams in the information publishing industry, like coaching, consulting, agencies, high ticket services, stuff like that. We can work with software, but that's usually not our main clients.
Yeah.
Our other company inside of Closers.io is called Remote Closing Academy. And that basically is a company that either does two things. Number one, it takes maybe a guy or a girl who's younger or in their 30s and is really trying to create income, okay? And basically teaches them the really most valuable income skill I think you can have in your entire lifetime, which is sales. Right? And so not only do we teach them the skill, but we also help them get into the right sales opportunity. Because the same way as in business, for instance, not all opportunities are created equal, right? Well, it's very, very similar in sales. So that's what we help them do is not only just download the skill into them, but find a opportunity and then succeed in that opportunity. Now, also, we work with a ton of people from real estate, insurance, solar, door knocking, stuff like that, to where it's okay and they got a little bit of the sales skills, but again, they're looking for a better opportunity.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about selling for one of our clients or getting into the alternative education industry is essentially that it's remote, all the leads are inbound. So typically you're not just prospecting to generate all your leads on your own. A lot of it's inbound. So you're getting people actually set onto your calendar. The sales cycle's a lot shorter. The income potential's a lot better.
Are we talking about the people you're training right now? Okay.
Yeah, the people that we're training. Yeah.
All right, so let's go back a couple of steps here. So that part is really awesome about this. So I'm at the part in my business right now where we're actually looking for new sales associates, and it's a similar situation where it's like everyone wants to try out for this, but whenever I hear a good salesperson, so I used to take acting classes. Whenever I'd be in a room with a great actor, I'd be like, oh, I can tell immediately. Or if when I play basketball and a guy brings the ball up, and I can watch him 3 or 4 possessions, I'm like, this guy is better than everyone else very quickly. When I listen to guys on sales calls, it is very apparent to me when I'm listening to somebody who's a closer, because I'm good at marketing, but I've definitely done some sales, but whenever I hear the guys who are just completely deal with the objections, they're fantastic at it. It's very quick for me to see that. And when I listen to your podcast, or when I listen to, I probably watch 40, 50 of your videos. When I was watching those things, you went over these techniques on how these people got really good at that. And that was something very, very important. So there's probably a lot of people out here when it comes to dealing with objections, specifically, you went over the dealing with uncertainty, financial, and then spouse and partner, and you said that the objections were they start with uncertainty and spouse and partner, or I'm sorry, and then you get to financial later, because if you don't deal with the first two, you don't get the last one. There's something you said that was really important that I loved, was that you could get a guy to the end of the sales call and you would ask him for 100% certainty. And you said sometimes you had salespeople who were like, well, I might be putting my guy in a box. And you're like, well, I want him in that box because if he's not 100% certain, he's not going to buy anyway.
Yeah.
So can you go into that a little bit?
Well, so the first sale you have to make on any sales call is the sale that this is the right thing, now is the right time, right? So I know you had actually Nick Cosman on. I was watching that before I reached out to you. And what he talks about is getting them bought in on the thesis, right? So what is the thesis? The thesis is the belief that it's not necessarily the product, but the method associated with the product is the fastest, most effective, best way to get to outcome. Okay, so you know who Russell Brunson is, right? This is the easiest example to give, is essentially if you watch his presentations and how he sells from stage or his marketing, he never tries to sell you on ClickFunnels. It's not like a software demo where he's like, well, here's the features, here's what you can do, here's this and that. What he does is he tries to sell you on the idea that funnels is the most fastest, effective, best way to get customers online, because by nature of believing that belief, you're going to buy ClickFunnels, right? So a great salesperson, the first sale they make is on the method. The second sale is on the product, right? So for instance, if I'm taking somebody who is like let's say he's a guy, 25 years old, he wants to finally start making some money. Maybe he's looking at Amazon FBA as like a business opportunity. He's looking at like affiliate marketing, and he's looking at becoming a closer or like a salesperson, right? Well, in our sales process, in our marketing process, we want to convince him that the most effective way to go from zero to essentially making $10,000 or $20,000 a month online is not by doing, all these business models, but by learning one high value skill in sales, right? Because if I can get them to believe that, that is the method I should do, if I can get them to believe into that thesis, well, then obviously they're going to want to work with me for our training, our placement, stuff like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right? Because you have the expertise. So obviously I'd rather have you do this. It's almost like when Nick Cosman talks about a dynamic sales letter. He talks, and then after a while you're like, oh, no, you should be doing this for me. That's essentially something to that extent. Like because I was watching your videos and I was like, this is really great stuff. And at the end I was like, oh no, this is the guy who needs to be training me. Obviously he's giving me level 1 of level 19.
Yeah. So we got to get him bought into the thesis. It's not just the thesis, but this is the right thing. Now is the right time. Right. And so that belief, the true buy-in to that belief, gets rid of what's called uncertainty-based objections. That's the classic, I want to think about it, send me a proposal, this sounds great, let's do it next quarter, I need to sleep on it. Like that's anything that's keeping them from being less than 100% certain that this is the right thing, now is the right time. Once I have them bought in on the thesis and the idea, then we can handle partner, like I call it support objections, which is basically any deference of authority outside of themselves. The typical is spouse and partner, but it could be the chair of the board. It could be the team downline that's actually implementing the project, right? So any deferral of authority, I consider that logistics, or it could be a smokescreen. A smokescreen for the uncertainty, right? That's why we want to get them bought into the uncertainty, or that this is the right thing, now is the right time.
How can you tell when he's saying I got to talk to my wife first, but really it's in his own personal? How can you tell when that's not real?
So what I would do is I'd say, if you said, man, I got to talk to my wife, I'd say no problem. And just so I could stay organized on my end, like when we covered the 3 key points to help you get more customers online through funnels, right? Like, how do you feel about the process? Like having to speak with your spouse aside, like, do you feel like that's what you need to get your customers, your customer gen to the point that we talked about earlier in the call? And then what I want to look for is I want to see what their tonality is. Because if they say, dude, totally, right? That's certainty, right? If they say, I think so, right? I'm like, I think so. I'm going to like call that out, but playfully, to where it's like.
So you call out the uncertainty. That was another thing.
You have to, and it's a little bit of mind reading, right? So it's like if they're like, I think so, I'll kind of like josh them a little bit, and I'm like, I think so. Like, what's really going on? And I say that with kind of a smile on my face, so I'm playing with them. It's not like pressury.
Are your calls on Zoom, or you can see the guy?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
I really recommend Zoom, especially post-COVID. Now, so many people use Zoom, and it's such a normal thing that I recommend always using Zoom, just because I can see, like in these types of difficult conversations, I want to be able to look them in the eye. I want them to look me in the eye. Right. And then I could read their body language. I can see kind of, are they certain? Are they not certain? So anyways, they talk about, or they say they want to talk to their spouse. I'm going to do that first tie down on, do they believe the process is what they need to get to whatever outcome they told me on the call? Now, if they say, yeah, it definitely is, I say, gotcha. So like, let's just say you'd already talking to your spouse and they said, you know what, Michael, like, if you want to do this and you think it's the best thing for you, then 100% go ahead. So if you already had that conversation and we're talking right now, what do you think would be the next step from here? And if they say anything but we're moving forward, right, then there's some uncertainty.
Yes, you've uncovered the uncertainty.
So if they say, well, like I'd have to do a little bit more research, and then I'd say, okay, so we're not 100% certain that this is the right thing, now it's the right time, but you have to be playful. It's not like I'm not really even trying to get them to buy as much as I am just trying to have a truthful conversation. I just want to get to the truth of, is this the right thing for them or not? And are they truly committed to the change that they told me about earlier on the call? Like, are they going to align their actions with their words? Because I just want to hold them accountable to the things they already said they wanted to do. But if like they don't, at the end of the day, I just want to get to the truth. That's my outcome as a salesperson.
Right. So it's interesting because I think a lot of people would be like, oh man, you're calling them out for their tonality. And but the thing you said before is like, if they're not absolutely certain, it's like then they're not going to buy anyway. You're going down this path, like you can get them down really far down the path, but like you're not going to get the close because you need to take them down the steps.
Well, part of the call out too is not coming from the frame of, oh, you weren't honest with me. It's more coming from the frame of like, look, dude, if you come in and we work on your social life, like for you, like your social life, your purpose, et cetera, and your discipline, if you come in, like this isn't something where I'm going to give you a bunch of modules and tell you good luck. Like this is something where I'm invested in your success. Yeah. And if you're not equally as invested in it, then let's get that out of the way now so that we can align with each other and really figure this out. So can we have a truthful conversation? Yeah. So you see how I'm taking the frame. So, a lot of, and this is similar is dating and stuff. Like a lot of these frames apply in sales. So you can see I'm taking the frame, what's called a preeminence frame. And that means I'm framing what I'm doing in their own best interests. Now, obviously you want to do that ethically. Like if I'm saying what I just told you, I am concerned, like I want you to come in and be 100% bought in, have a truthful conversation, great expectations up front. But the preeminence frame is essentially the frame that what I'm saying is framed in their own best interests, which increases compliance and gets more buy-in, if that makes sense.
There were a bunch of different things that you went over. So that one you talked about, by the way, the tonality thing. The first time I'd ever heard that was, I think, chapter 10 of Jordan Belfort's book. Yeah. Have you heard that?
Yeah, that's a great book.
Absolute certainty or whatever. By the way, this is another thing when we talk about brand building. Jordan Belfort's a convicted felon, and we were all scratching and clawing to buy his next sales product. And I've said this before to other people, and you don't have to answer this, but like if Bernie Madoff got out of prison in another universe and put out like a 20-part sales process, everybody would have bought it.
Everybody would buy it.
Everyone would have bought it. They wouldn't have cared at all. That's why.
As you should, because at the same time, by knowing these influence and persuasion techniques, you can keep yourself from being deceived.
Deceived.
So, for instance, when Robert Cialdini wrote Influence, he didn't write it for businesses trying to influence their customers as much as he wrote it for consumers to protect them from deceitful advertising. Now, what happened was, everybody, all the people that read it were business owners. So his next book, Persuasion, was actually influence geared towards business owners. Yeah. So I mean, I if he came out with a book, I'd buy it.
Of course, I want to know.
You want to know how to use that stuff ethically, but also to protect yourself from being deceived.
For sure. But the other point I wanted to make is I see some people, they're like, well, Michael, I'm afraid. And I'm sure you've seen some salespeople, because I know some, like Nick does not go big into brand building, but Greg O'Gallagher, who's his best friend, he does, right? He's very much, his brand is in addition to the program that he sells, right? And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to build that brand because I'm afraid of, future prospects, or it's going to make me look bad, or I'm in a video with Lamborghinis and watches and girls and that kind of stuff. And my whole point was like, again, Jordan Belfort was a convicted felon. They made it, like when you think about, when you explain his life in a vacuum, you're like, this guy was in business, was investigated by the SEC, was convicted of a felony, and then they made a movie to expose all the horrible things that he'd done. If I say that to you, you're like, oh, this guy must be below the ground at this point. He must have wanted to kill himself. Like, no, he's fantastically rich now. Fantastically. He's 10 times wealthier than he was when he was ripping people off. That's what happened. Your brain doesn't calculate that. But one of the things we say in the Men of Action group is status is status is status. Just like I said before, like the highest approval rating during the Clinton administration was after the scandal with him and Monica Lewinsky. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's like a damaging admission, right? So in sales copy, they teach like one of the things you want to do is admit the shortfalls of your product, and in doing so, everything else you seem or you're going to say afterwards is more truthful, right?
Or just being truthful in general, right? Yeah. So in all these examples, it's like somebody being like, I came out, yes, I was a felon, or I came out, and yes, I did this with Monica Lewinsky, or whatever. Yeah. In this case, you know what? It doesn't seem like you're being honest with me about your tonality, whatever. You don't seem like you're 100%.
Right.
What I'm telling people is that the genuine whoever you are is going to be the best salesperson or the best brand that you're going to build, rather than this one that you're trying to build that's specifically for churchgoers, specifically for executive. Like I tell people all the time, like, who can get in front of venture capitalists faster, you, me, or Jake Paul? But Jake Paul has nothing to do with venture capital. But we know he could. In 2 seconds, he could, because status is status is status. He doesn't have venture capital status. He just has more status, and that's why that works. And that's what the other thing I was talking about. We listen to like Elon Musk. It's like he makes comments on Twitter about things he knows nothing about. If it was about material physics, of course I'm gonna listen to Elon Musk. But like some of the things he has no idea about. But because he's so wealthy, we're like, whatever you say, Elon.
He could say anything.
Let's listen to you because he has status. So anyway, just going back to what you were saying before, I just love the fact that even at this point, we're sitting here talking about it. Whatever it's successful. It doesn't matter who it's coming from if it works. You understand? I mean, we read what's The Prince by Machiavelli. That man was a terrible fucking human being, and people still read that book, and they're like, oh man, look at all this incredible stuff we learned. Can we talk about this? So the original reason why I brought this up was with the tonalities, and you also talked about language patterns. You're the first salesperson I've heard specifically talk about tonalities as far as like a sales technique, understanding to read tonalities. And I don't know if I've heard you say this about using your own tonalities in order to do this, but mainly to read the tea leaves to understand what the person you're talking to is thinking.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the biggest thing I would say I look at is that difference in certain tonality versus uncertain tonality, right? And the classic one is when you do that tie down, if they say, it's, dude, 100%.
Yeah.
Versus I think so, right?
Yeah.
So I would call that out. Now, in terms of teaching salespeople tonality, I don't do necessarily what Jordan Belfort does and try to teach. Like, I know he has like the very specific different tonalities.
Lean forward, lean back.
Yeah, I don't necessarily teach that, but what I do teach is when I review calls, because the best way to train salespeople is reviewing game tapes. So that's one of the things we teach our clients to do with their salespeople is to review game tape every day, just the same way a sports team would. You
say listen to wins. You listen to 2 wins every day.
Yeah. That's good. You've been through the content. That's good.
Can you go into that?
Well, so the big thing about that is that the fastest way to get really, really good with sales, and this is the thing about sales as a business skill, is there's no business skill I've ever found that can provide a faster feedback loop in terms of getting better because you can go through your call recordings. So what you want to do is you need to work with your coach and with yourself to kind of break down slowly the calls that didn't go well. But like, for instance, when I was a salesperson full time, what I would do is I would work out every single, especially when you're in sales, it is good to have like an explosive workout early in the morning to really get your nervous system up. Or opposed to now, I'm obviously not doing the sales calls. I have like a 30-person sales team. So now I'm like writing copy in the morning. It's a little bit different type of speed. So when I would work out in the morning, what I would do is listen to 2 wins and usually like 1.5x, 2x speed.
While you're lifting?
While I was lifting every single day. Because what it does is, especially when you have droughts in sales, it trains my brain to remember, like, I've done this 1,000 times. I'm great at this. Like when I get on calls, I get credit cards. Here's what it sounds like when I close. And it conditions your brain on what a good call is. And like, let's say anybody who's been in sales, they'll have this experience where, their performance probably does this like anything, right? So what we want to do is we want to take that call that's at the top of the peak where they get off the call, they're like, man, that was the best call I've ever had.
Yeah.
So we take that recording and then we start listening to it, because then what we can do is it raises our baseline.
Yeah.
Right. So now that becomes our new floor.
Yeah.
Right. That becomes our new rolling average. So it's funny. It's like over time you start listening to like better calls and better calls and better calls, and like like the way you ask questions, the way you'll do your pitch, like everything will just become more authentic and more smooth because you truly have not only done it so many times, but you've listened to yourself do it so many times.
Yeah.
So I find that helps a lot.
Yeah, that definitely the 1.5 speed, and you talked about audiobooks too. Like like in passing, the audiobooks thing was probably the biggest game changer for me. Is I listened to you at double speed for the last 2 days, and then that has been a huge game changer for me. I take notes on audiobooks I listen to, and then you saw about as far as the wins are concerned, I have to go back through my podcast at like double speed and give notes to my editors.
Right.
And so that has definitely been the example I love. Have you ever read The Winner Effect?
No, but I think it sounds familiar, so I might know the idea if you tell me.
We go, I play basketball like every day, and we go out, and the first thing I want to do is get 3 feet underneath the basket and watch the ball go in the hoop, and it can't touch the rim. And I'll do that several times, and I'll take a couple steps back, and then I'll watch it go through the rim, and I'll watch it go through the rim. And it gets to one of these things where there is all this negativity, and yes, you might miss the shot, and there's all these other parts that are involved, but seeing there's a physiological, people don't understand, there is a neurochemical change in your brain. That's what the book is about. That happens when you see winning things happen. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
One of my favorite examples ever is what a mile is 1,000 paces of a Roman legion. 2,000 years ago, that's where they came up with the term for a mile. And so since that was probably a couple hundred years before Christ, in that point, there's been 2,000 years of everyone running a mile under 4 minutes, right? And then Roger Bannister comes and he runs a mile in under 4 minutes, right? And so it took 2,000 years for somebody to do that. How long did it take for the second person to run a mile under 4 minutes? You know?
Yeah, it's like a couple of days. Right?
42 days later, somebody did.
Yeah.
And the point is, because, and I promise you, the second person, it's the same thing when Michael Johnson broke the world record in the 200 meters, 7 other guys in that race also broke the previous world record. And the reason why is because they saw, it doesn't matter, it's not muscle growth or speed or training. You literally saw someone else accomplish this thing, right?
See it.
Again, like the ability to hit 3-pointers was not something, but in 1986, if you told guys, hey, yeah, well, I'm going to hit 600 in a season, they'd be like, you're out of your fucking mind. And now guys are doing that. And so now it's become, now because Steph Curry did it, now you see Jordan Poole, no problem, I'm going to hit the, you know, now you see other guys doing this, no problem, because they saw someone else do it. So when you're like, let me look at a baseline of the best I can do. We have this statement in the military. You're not, whenever you come to an emergency, a stressful situation, you're not going to rise to the level of your expectations. You're going to fall to the level of your training. That's exactly right. So that when you say that, now my new baseline is before it was a 6, now my new baseline is an 8. That makes a ton of sense, just to seeing these wins over and over again. Because if you focus on the negative, and of course you at some point you're going to have to focus on the negative, otherwise you're going to crash your car, you're going to go bankrupt. Of course you have to focus on the negative, but the problem is, for your mind, from a neurological standpoint, the best thing is, if I didn't know I could bench 350 and you put 350 on a bench, I might be like, oh, that's a lot of weight, but I know I can do it because I've seen myself do it before. Or you have a buddy of yours that you're competitive with and he benches 350, you're like, fuck yeah, I'm going to do this. There's no way I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, you got to acknowledge the negative, but focus on the positive.
Correct. The other one, I love this. So you don't specifically talk about tonality, but you do say the word no problem all the time. And there's some tonality in the way you say that in order to sort of like diffuse situations instead of going for a hard close.
Yeah, that's very true. So when you get an objection, like if you've ever been on the other end of a sales call, when you get an objection, what people will do is they'll say, or a lot of times a salesperson who's a little bit younger will give a rebuttal, right? They're trained to give a rebuttal. Like they've done their flashcards, like they hear the objection, they're like, I want to think about it. What do you want to think about?
Yeah.
Right? And that is the easiest thing to just like raise sales resistance and just really get the person in this stage of like, I need to get off the phone.
Yeah.
Right. So to do the opposite of that, and I learned this from one of my mentors, is just say, no problem, pause.
Yeah.
No problem, pause.
The pause part is another thing. Like there's this uncomfortable silence. You talk about that here in a second after you finish this part.
Yeah. So it's no problem, pause, which diffuses the pressure. And then what we want to do is we want to ask a question. Usually in any situation, we want to ask a question, again, that brings them back to the idea or the question of, are they 100% certain that this is the right thing, now is the right time? And what we want to do is ask that, and then if they say it is, and we get the certainty from the tonality, then we circle back and get another tie down, right? So I say, no problem, and just so I can say, regardless on my end, like when you think about the 4 things we covered so that you could get to desired outcome in this time frame, do you feel like it's 100% what you need? They say whatever they're going to say, great. So if I'm understanding correctly, money aside or whatever it is aside, you're 100% in, right? And so I really want to use that 100% language and the direct, like the issue with people, like I'll see who do this, because when you train salespeople, what happens is they'll be like, you'll get on a call, a group call or whatever, and they'll be like, well, I was doing that, and then I'll listen to the call, and it's like they talk in circles, right? It's much more powerful if it's just like, so money aside, you're 100% in, like direct, and that binding language there lets me know if they're 100% in or not, and I want to watch them really closely, because any sort of like, like they can't help it, right? Because they don't want to lie. So any sort of like iffiness, I just call out immediately, and a lot of times they'll just laugh because I do it like in a fun way. So then they'll laugh, and then we can have the real conversation about what's going on. I can handle that objection, then I can re-tie down, and then I can handle like finance, spouse, all of that stuff is more logistical, right? But first, I need them bought on the idea that the method is what they need to get the desired outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. It also goes back to Jordan Belfort, where he talks about straight line selling, and people start talking. They go off to Jupiter. I think that's what he says.
He keeps on the straight line. Yeah,
off to Jupiter.
And to be honest, like I've taken it and really tailored it to my style. But I did get this from his little phraseology and his looping stuff that he teaches in his book. That's like what he says is, if like he goes for a big ask with the stocks back in the day.
Yeah. And
then if they start to squirm, it's like, well, like, what do you think about the idea? Like, do you like the idea? And so you see how he does that? That is what he's doing. And it's funny because a lot of this stuff, it's like, I didn't read a bunch of sales books, then get into sales. I just took thousands and thousands and thousands of calls. And then along the way, started reading these books. And I was like, oh, I do that too. And you start to decipher why you're doing what you're doing works. And you have to do that to be able to teach other people. Like, I think, there's probably more charismatic and better salespeople than me. I'm very good. But what I will say is, like, I do understand why everything, little tiny thing that I'm doing, why it works, which makes me a great trainer.
Yeah.
And
It's almost like, would you rather learn to shoot from Steve Nash or Michael Jordan? You can learn to shoot from Michael Jordan, but I don't have a 42-inch vertical and humongous hands. I learned from Steve Nash. Steve Nash is a little bit more
fundamentally sound.
Right? It's not even fundamentally sound. He's more limited, just like I might be limited. He can't dunk, and he's like 6 feet tall.
So he has to be more fundamentally sound.
So he has to be more fundamentally sound. Like, that's what I say. Like, a lot of times in the NBA, you'll see these guys like Magic Johnson was not a good coach. He was not a good coach, right? Yeah. Because Magic's like, just be 6'9" and then just dunk on people like I did. It's like, no, I can't do that. I can't do what you do, Magic. And so when you say that, it's like, that makes a lot of sense, rather than just being some like super flashy, charismatic guy who. And we'll get into. I also want to get into influencers, because that's another thing. Sure. Instead of having a ton of those advantages, you're like, hey, I can teach anyone to do this. That's an issue that I have with my program with MOA. A lot of times the guys will be like, Michael, you already have some followers, and I'm like, I don't have that many followers. And they're like, but these girls already know you. I'm like, no, a lot of them don't know who I am. And I'm like, let me show you from the start. A lot of times my testimonials help with that. It's like, I'll show a guy who's like, this guy went from nothing. I had one client, he had 3 fractures in his vertebrae. He was in a neck brace, and he became a big influencer because he started doing these TikTok videos where he's brushing his teeth with the neck brace on,
nice.
And then, like, putting his clothes on with it. But they were comedy videos.
Yeah.
And then I have another client who's a little bit vertically challenged, and this guy is just like throwing the biggest photo shoots in the biggest photo shoots in Los Angeles right now. Nice. He is destroying LA. And so I show these guys, like, they went from nothing. And then I have a Harvard professor. I have 2 F-18 pilots, and they're in my program. And it's like, oh, you don't want to do anything with the nightclub scene. Well, that's okay. Let's talk about this. I have one guy who's an accountant, and he's like, he has more clients than he knows what to do with. I have another buddy of mine. He's living on his family's couch, and now he just got a job at JP Morgan. I teach all these different things. I'm like, let's come from 0 and get to 1. Now, if you want to see what 10 looks like, you can watch my lifestyle too, but like, let's see what all these things do. So that's really great when it comes to the objections or teaching the fundamentals. That's what I really liked about your whole deal.
And in terms of what you said too, like when you're telling a guy that they can do X, right? That's a claim. And so what I teach in sales is every claim, and this is also from like direct response sales copy too, which if you want to learn how to be great at sales, that's another thing you should study.
Yeah.
But in direct response, they teach every claim should have 3 forms of proof, and you kind of did it there. Ooh. So it's like you make the claim like, hey, you should to get like result, you should X. Right. Well, then you tell your personal story to prove that to be true. But not only that, then you tell. So it's called living proof. Mm-hmm. But then you give social proof. So you said, and then also I taught this person who was just like you to do the same. Right. And the reason I was able to both do it myself and also teach that person is because it works like this, which is reason why proof.
Yeah.
So when I try to make a claim and then prove it to be true, I start with living proof, which is my story, social proof, which is somebody else's story, and then reason why proof, which is like the 3rd grade language
like logic
of why it works.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So you might say, here's why it works for me, here's why it works for my client, or here's my story of how it works for the client, and then you might say, and the reason why it works is, in David Buss's evolutionary psychology book, there's this principle, which makes it work.
Have you read this?
Result. No, it's actually on my list next. But it's almost like I've read it through hearing so many people talk about it. But it's on my list next because I've heard you talk about it before, and I was like, he's going to ask me if I read it.
Yeah, the whole world makes sense, bro. Once you, it's not just David Buss. David Buss, I think, is the best articulator of it. But Steven Pinker and Gad Saad are also guys that can articulate. Gad Saad is the closest as far because he does with behavioral psychology, and he goes over how evolutionary psychology affects sales. So you really might want to check out some of his book, The Parasitic Mind, and some of those books like that.
Well, it all stems from that.
Yeah.
Both marketing, sales, all of that stuff, because you have to work with sort of that primitive brain and the prefrontal cortex, and there's just different things you got to address within that.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic, man. All right, so let's go to this. There's another thing I really liked. I've had this issue before with previous salespeople. It's like they had the discount offer already in the back of their mind. They were ready to use it every time there was any sort of objection. It's like, oh, no, we'll cut 25% off or whatever. You say in the beginning, you don't offer that, and you don't offer payment plans in the beginning. You do that later, and I love that. Can you go over that real quick?
Yeah, so with sales, okay, this is very interesting. If you put your products on a web page, there is studies to prove that, like, if you give them 3 options, they choose the middle one or whatever, right? So it's like if you could go, like, if you're buying a flight, and granted, again, this is lower ticket. So there's different rules that apply.
Yeah.
If you're buying a flight, there might be economy plus, and first class, right? If you list those out, chances are most people will pick economy plus, whatever that
Yes.
is, right? Now with sales, I think it's because there's a higher price tag. Essentially what I have found is when you give them a bunch of options, you create, oh, this sounds really good. I do want to do something. I got to go away and think about it so I can figure out what to do. So, and the other problem is that with salespeople, in a sign, like they want to get the credit card, right? They want to get the win and they want to leave saying, well, you know, they didn't have that much money, so I sold them the thing that I could sell them. So what you want to do is you eliminate all options and they sell one thing. And then where you create the variation is the price and the terms. So for instance, let's say, this has happened like a bajillion times, so this is something we help all clients with, is let's say a client has a 10K program and a $1,500 downsell that liquidates the ad spend, right? Very typical. Well, what happens is you're gonna get all your salespeople, not all of them, but like a lot of salespeople, when somebody doesn't have the money, instead of actually handling the objection, what they do is they downsell.
Yes.
They give the client a Band-Aid, which is not even the best thing for the client because they needed the 10K thing.
Yes.
And then they come back and they're like, well, you know, I had 5 calls and I closed 1 on the 10K. I closed 3 on the 1K. I mean, that's all they could afford. And it justifies their own inability to close.
Yeah.
So I eliminate that altogether. And what I do is I give them the 10K. And then what we do at the end is we state the pay in full price first. So we go for 10K. So if it's like, hey, the investment's 10K, right? And then what we do is we tie down first that this is the right thing, now's the right time. So they might say, dude, this sounds really good, I want to do it. Like, is there like payment options or like how does it work? And I say, well, it depends, but let's answer the most important question, like how do you feel? Like, do you feel like my method to get to X is what you need to get your social life back on track? They say, dude, 100%. Gotcha. So really money and if we can figure out the money, you're 100% in. They say, yeah. Then I would say, great. So look, most of the clients do it up front, but for certain clients, kind of depending on their situation, sometimes Michael's okay with breaking it up if that's really what they need. But all of it's all customized, and I kind of got to let him know your situation so I can, you know, make sure that.
So this is after the point. They have to agree that this is the right time and this is the right thing.
Right.
Then you are open to sales,
Yeah.
to payment plan, because this is a big issue that I've had with before. Because it's the same thing. It's like you go to the bar to try to pick up a hot girl and you keep going home with your ex. Like that's what, you know. It's like, well, my ex is the easiest thing, so I'm just going to go back home to my ex.
Yeah, the path of least resistance.
The path of least resistance, and I have to keep telling them, like, no, you got to keep fighting, bro. Because the problem is, it's not it's not just this. You're not getting better. You're devaluing yourself and you're devaluing my product.
Right.
So I need you to keep fighting for the 10K option. And so that's exactly right.
So what we do is we go for what's called the open wallet, right? So I say most of Michael's clients do it up front, but for certain clients, depending on their financial situation, he allows it to break it up. But he's got to kind of know your financial situation to know something like this would be appropriate. Yeah. So are you open to having an honest conversation financially, getting everything out on the table to see if there's a way we can make this work, or at the very least, we can create a game plan for you to work towards this in the future? And they say yes. Then you say, gotcha. So I know your insurance right now. In the next like 30 days, how much excess cash flow do you have coming in? Right? So they say, oh, I make like 5K, and then I'm gonna have 1K left over the bills. Okay. And what's your cash on hand right now exactly? And so we ask that first question, it's a pacing question. The second question, I want to know how much is in their checking, which sounds aggressive. However, if they really trust me at this point and they're like, dude, this is what I need to get the result, they're gonna and there's a potential way to make it work, then they're gonna tell me what's in their bank account if I can find a creative way to make a good solution for them. Yeah. So I say, what's your cash on hand right now exactly? Right now exactly is a good terminology there. And sometimes they might get a little bit of resistance, and you just gotta say, hey, I'm not asking like what can you spend right now. I just want to know like what's total available, like what's actually in there, so we can create a game plan. And I'm open to this not being the best thing for you right now, but I don't know how to help you unless I have the information in terms of where you're at, right? So they say that. Then we go to credit. So we get all, like they might have, let's say, it's a 10K program, but they have 7,500 cash on hand and like 2K on a credit card, right? So then I'll say something like this. I'll say, look, and you still really want to do this, right? And they're like, yep. Well, look, based on what you told me earlier about X, Y, and Z, I don't think the best thing for you is to, drop 10K on a credit card and go to zero, At the same time, based on what you told me about X, Y, and Z, I don't think the best thing for you is to do nothing. So what I'd be willing to do for you is I'll let you in for half, so 4,900. That way you can come in, let's say it's a business program. You can come in, you can get our lead system in, you can get the sales process in, you could even close a couple of clients to where that way when the second payment comes around 30 days down the road, it's just an afterthought. Yeah. So if I'm willing to do that for you, are you willing to move forward right now?
Right.
So that's how you say it. And so there's a
You said you'd like making a deal, like making a trade.
you always make a trade, right?
Okay.
So when you can't just say like the typical salesperson, right? It's like, well, it's 10K. They're like, do you have payment plans? Well, yeah. Like, I mean, could you do two payments, right? So what I do is I see actually what could they do, what's most appropriate for them, and then I prescribe them what I believe is the best pathway for them to do, and I make it seem like, well, I am doing them a favor, right? First of all, like, I mean, it's 10K. I'm letting you split it up. So I frame it as a favor, and I'm saying, look, if I let you in for X, and then I future pace. So you can come in, get your lead system down, close some clients, blah, 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 to where it's an afterthought. If I'm willing to do that for you, will you move forward right now? So I'm trading the better terms for a decision now. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so a couple other things I did there too is, there's a lot of permission that goes on. So I'm double tying down, and then I ask permission. Are you open to having an honest conversation financially? Yeah. I also frame that by also saying, look, most of Michael's clients do it up front. Yeah. Right. So one of the things Cialdini talks about is people want to do what's like the average. Sure. Right. So look, most of them do it up front.
Middle standard deviation.
Yeah. So I frame it like, it's like, he has that book that says, like, when in the hotel, when he says 97% of customers recycle or whatever it is, and then like more people recycle.
Yes.
So it's like most of them do it up front, but for certain clients, depending on their situation, we allow them to break it up, permission, get all the resources, and then I confirm. And you still really want to do this, right? So I make them come closer to me, and then I do the offer, right? And then if I get uncertainty, and I know they can do it because we did the open wallet test, I know how much money they have. Yeah. I say, well, dude, I know you can do it. So like, can we be real honest with each other for a second? What's really going on? And you just got to look them in the eye when you say that, and you just got to be also somebody who's like, it's not combative. You were on the same side of the table as them. Like, if they don't want to do it, then they don't want to do it. But if they've been telling you that, for 30 minutes, all the reasons why this is so important, and then you get to the end and they're going to be a little bit squirmy. If you're going to be a leader and their advocate, right, and somebody who's looking out for their best interests, then it's your duty to align their actions with their words. Yeah. And you might say something like, look, you just told me X, Y, and Z. Now you're telling me, that you're scared, you don't have whatever, right? So the real question is not like, do you have the money or not? The real question is, like, are you going to make your decisions based on a place of your circumstances or based on a place of vision?
How much does this mean to you?
Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's beautiful, man.
Out of breath.
Okay. So here's the thing. One of the things that, for me, we have a term called irrefutable visual evidence. It doesn't actually have to be visual, but that's a term we have in MOA. It's called IVE. We beat people over with IVE. An advantage that I have is because I teach a networking product and we involve social media so often into it, right. I can literally show, here's an example, show followers, likes, and then here's the photo or video. Here's an exact, not a similar example. Here's an exact example of something that works. Let's copy this. And then I don't know if you see me and my followers, we all share memes. We share the fuck out of memes all the time, just sharing memes. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like a little underground thing that we have going on. Yeah. So we're able to do that. When I listened to you, it was very clear, even though it was an IVE, there was a little bit in it. The social proof that you had, it was very clear listening to you. You're a very good salesman. I didn't even have to hear you on a sales call because the things that you talked about dealing with the objections, those are the objections that I'd heard before previously. Right, yeah. What I think, this is just my theory. And I don't mean to be a hater, man, but I just feel like we live in an era now where the scumbagginess has increased so much where I'm constantly being inundated with, here's your blue check mark or buy this Forex. So often these things that clearly are frauds and don't work, that if you can even be a little bit honest, which is what you've been describing, you have a order of magnitude advantage over everyone else. Yeah. So one of the things I did was, because I get put into a category with self-help guys who tell you to breathe better and then you're going to become rich, and other pickup guys who are like, follow these 6 instructions and you're going to get women, and they're both fucking liars. Right. And then I come in here and I'm like, listen, I'm not going to go anywhere until you see irrefutably, watch these 50 testimonials of my clients, and then go and see their social media, irrefutable visual evidence that what I'm saying is true. It's like there's this thing that clicks off. It's like, oh, this is like, for the first time, I'm not being scammed. For the first time. And I even expressed the weaknesses in the program. This isn't going to work for you. And I tell guys all the time, listen, if you have an Academy Award, you play point guard for the Lakers, or you have $1 billion, you don't need my program. Don't even worry about it. Just move on. Right. And when I do that, I personally think that's the reason why Dan Fleyshman does well, or Ryan Stewman does well. I know that's why Brad Lee does well. I know that's why Wes Watson does well. And I think that's why you do well. I know that's why Nick Cosman does well. is because we actually can show what we're doing instead of making these pie in the sky promises to people. I love the testimonials idea. You know, listening to Russell Brunson, I cram so many testimonials whenever I do calls, and I'll have 50, 60 guys on here. One of my favorite techniques is a guy will ask a question. I guys, I'm going to mute myself. Go ahead, unmute. 17 guys unmute themselves, and they'll all say it at the same time. So rule number 6: nobody needs to know who you're fucking. Something like that. I was like, rule number 4: social media is fake. They'll all say it at the same time, and the guy's like, oh, okay, now I understand. And then we just show It's like, do you see this dude right here? And then I'll show 15 different examples of this thing going on. I am so insecure about the idea of anybody thinking I'm a fraud. I 10 times prove to them every single thing I tell you is true. Everything. Yeah. And then I think a lot of it was back and forth. And then I had Bilzerian on my podcast, and they're like, oh, shit. Like, wait, I didn't expect that. Wait, what is going on here? And then I had Tai Lopez on the podcast, and they're like, oh, shit. Hold on. Wait a second. This other guru I'm following, he can't do this. What's going on? And so I think from that, it's not just you're doing better; it's that you're doing better in a sea of fucking fraudsters. Because I think the internet has made that part way, way worse. Way worse. And guys selling things that just aren't realistic or aren't true or something like that. So when I watched you and I saw a lot of IVE and what you were doing, I thought I think that's part of the reason why you're so successful. Maybe you're aware of it or not. I just think that's part of the reason why you're so successful.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people like, so for instance, I mean, dude, there's been so many people who will take my stuff, and the next thing they know, they're a sales trainer, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll come into our company, and then all of a sudden they've never even built a sales team, but all of a sudden they're starting to be sales recruiters, and they're helping people build sales teams, right? So I think a big thing, and I'm not saying like, have you ever had a guy just look at your free stuff and then start thinking that he's a sales trainer? Yeah. I mean,
that is bro. I've had guys getting themselves in so much deep shit because they watch some free videos that I put out there, and then all of a sudden they start throwing their all events, and then bad stuff happens because they didn't listen to what I said. I said, don't ever throw your first event for money. There's like a bunch of rules that I have, and they just skip past those rules because they thought they knew better. So you've had that happen before?
Yeah, I mean, dude, and it just comes with the territory, right? And so, and the big thing I want to make clear is I'm not like some prodigy that I didn't learn from anybody, right?
Yeah.
Like I've had tremendous mentors that I've learned a lot of stuff with sales teams, a lot of stuff from sales. So it's not like I just came out of the womb, listen to me on this stuff, right? I had a lot of great mentors, and, I took 3,000 or 4,000 sales calls, right, in a very, very short time frame, was really, really good. I had a great track record. And like one of the things I always say in our marketing is, in terms of sales recruiting and sales team building, we are the only, like there's several people doing it in our space, and some of them are great. What I will say is we're the only people who are doing it to where I actually have a sales team that does $30 million a year cash, right? Nobody else has that, not even close. So like that our next best competitor maybe does $200,000 a month, right? We do $2.5 million a month. And I'm not saying that like, oh my God, we're so much better. But if you want to learn how to build a sales team, would you rather learn from the guy who's kind of giving you some people and maybe giving you some advice, and he's doing a couple $100,000 a month, or somebody who's built like a good, great organization, right? And so I think that, just to come full circle, the main thing is like, have you actually done the thing you're talking about and actually put in the work and have demonstrated a track record? Because like Naval Ravikant, for instance, says that one of the biggest things to become wealthy is to gain specialized knowledge. And specialized knowledge is something that you can't learn from a textbook. It can only be learned from the experience of doing. Therefore, that's why it's specialized, right? And so I think truly people who are teaching stuff out there, they don't have specialized knowledge, right? They maybe took a few programs, and then they're like, the classic ones like, they got to 10K a month with their Amazon business. Now they're teaching Amazon. Or they got a few clients in their fitness business, and now they're teaching other fitness pros how to have a fitness business. And it's just because for them, they feel like it's a money grab. And I think the biggest thing is focusing on actually like doing the thing and becoming really, really good at the thing. Because then not only are you going to feel better about yourself doing it and teaching it, but you're going to have a high signal to noise in terms of the marketplace, and like people actually listening to you and getting value and good word of mouth, all of that stuff.
Yeah, I hear this, and you may agree or disagree. I don't like the prescription of follow your passion, trust your feelings, and then you're gonna make millions of dollars. We have a saying here. Sorry, fuck your feelings, solve someone else's problem.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this.
Yeah.
Find a person who was 18 or below, who was like, when I grow up, I really want to be a salesperson. Nobody said that, right? Now, I am passionate about sales.
Yeah.
So how did that happen, right? Well, I'll tell you how it happened, okay? So it's funny because for me, I just made this up, but sales is the military of business.
Yeah.
Okay? So, also, I mean, there honestly might be people who grew up and they, from a young age want to go to the military, which I think is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
But a lot of times with sales, for instance, it's something to where, like for me, my story, I was trying to, follow my purpose and my passion and make money. And I kind of was trying to break out of the matrix. I was going to go to medical school and all this stuff. And then I read this book and I was like, from the moment I read that book, I was like, oh, I'm going to do something different, right? I didn't know what it was. And so I tried to start like three different businesses, totally terrible at all of them, ran out of money. And I was like, I'm going to get into sales. And it's funny because that's typically what happens with sales. It's like, my plan A didn't work out. So I'm getting into sales, right? That's why I call it like the military of business. And so the thing is, after I did something so many times, I started to enjoy it. I was like, I can gamify this.
Yes.
I can review my game tape. And if I say this a little bit different and I use this different language pattern, I'm going to get more closes. And then I would think about that and then I would implement it and then I would get more closes. And it becomes this like positive feedback loop. So there is some academic research about this. I can't quote it off the top of my head just because it's been a while since I've seen it, but there is like a lot of studies that show that people who become passionate about something, sure, you might be passionate about art when you're 12 and then you end up being an artist,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of people, their passion is found by actually doing something and becoming really good at it.
Yes.
And then therefore, once they make it through the valley of despair, they're like, it's almost like it gives them this certain sort of presence. And I tell like people, like when you get really good at sales, your sales calls will feel like a meditation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like whatever you could probably think of 2 or 3 things that you're amazingly world's best good at. And probably when you're doing those things, you like get in this place of like, almost like you're meditating, right?
Yeah.
Like you're totally present and it's almost like a game, and I think honestly, if people don't have that in their lives, they need to find something that they can at least pursue to become that, because I couldn't imagine living without something.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's being on stage with the microphone.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
You're not thinking. You're focusing on everybody else. You're focused on actually providing value, whether that's being funny or helping people, whatever, know. And I think everybody needs something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely it. The other thing I was going to say is, so the trust your feelings part, you're teaching part 2 before part 1. So if I am a cardiologist, I want to do 10,000 heart surgeries, then I get to trust my feelings.
Exactly.
Okay. If I am, if one of the things I have maybe 150 landings in a Cessna 172 or a Piper Warrior. By the time I got through 60, 70 landings, for me to describe to you how to bleed off the energy on an airplane and then let the main gear touch the ground, I can describe it to you in a book, but you literally have to feel it in your lower intestines. Like there's this gut feeling you have when you're pulling the yoke back. I can't describe it to you. You have to do it, right? And it's also me trying to write a book on how to throw a football. You have to feel the way the ball just rolls off your fingers in order for you to do it. Trusting your feelings, well, everybody out there, listen, trusting your feelings is a great way to be broken alone. You need to gather the expertise. And this is the problem when I find a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs. They think they want to be entrepreneurs because they don't want a boss. They're too arrogant to have a boss. No, I'm not arrogant enough to not learn from someone who knows way more than me. Someone who knows more than me, I'm going to shut the fuck up and I'm going to let them teach me so that I can learn, so that later on I can give up my 40-hour a week job for my 80-hour entrepreneurial job. Because that's the other part. People think they're going to work less when they become entrepreneurs.
Not at first.
Bro, I've heard so many people say this. And so they don't understand that once you become an entrepreneur, you have this problem where it's like, oh, I had a boss. Well, guess what? When you are the boss, your job is to serve your clients, your customers, and I serve my salespeople. I tell my guys when they want to film a VSL, I'm just like, I'm your whore, dude. You tell me where the fuck to go. I'm just standing there. What, 4 hours? Okay, 4 hours. What line you want me to read? Okay, I'll read whatever you want. Yeah. And I become that person. I'm there to serve them as well. And so a lot of people don't understand. You go into they see entrepreneurship as this arrogant glow up. No, it's a function of humility that happens where you just get people are going to take lots of pieces of you. And in exchange, you have 7 or 8 figures in your bank account. And to me, that's a worthwhile trade-off. Some people, they don't understand what that trade-off is. So it is a subject matter expertise and a level of experience. Then you can trust your feelings. You can trust your instinct. When you're a psychologist and you've dealt with several people with cluster B personality disorders, you're like, that guy's a psychopath. You can tell very quickly, right? And so me actually hearing hundreds of sales calls and seeing people produce sales. My sales guy, I wanted him as my roommate, so he lived with me. So he's doing sales calls in the other room, and I just listened to him every day.
Oh yeah.
And I've had several of them. In fact, most of the guys who've done sales have lived with me at one point. Nice. I just listened to him every day.
Nice.
And after listening to him over and over again, I'm like, okay, that's a good one. He got that guy. I already know he got that guy.
Right.
Because again, you can trust your feelings when you have experience. It's these people who come out and don't know what they're talking about, and they're like, I want to be, like you said, I want to be an astronaut. And it's like, you don't understand what that means.
They should find something hard, especially something hard that most people don't want to do.
Yeah.
Which sales is a great example. And then do a lot of that. But you know what's interesting is you mentioned. Just getting into entrepreneurship and not mentorship. You know, when I usually get asked, like, well, if you had to tell somebody who's just starting out, like, based on your experience now, like, what would you do? I always say, find a company that you find really interesting, or somebody you follow that you find really interesting or you're passionate about, and go work for the rocket ship company in that industry.
Yes.
Right. And that doesn't mean, Facebook is so big. I think you should try to get something that's like their $1 million to sort of $10 million a year range. But that's exactly what I did. Is I found a company that I was like, man, this company, I could just tell, was like, it's a rocket ship company. It's in an industry that I'm really, really passionate about. And I was able to get in, become the top salesperson, and learn from the entrepreneur who was running that company. And that sort of, I was getting paid like $30,000, $40,000 a month to essentially get mentored by somebody who had a multiple 8-figure net worth, let's say. And that was the most valuable experience I ever had. And while, yeah, sure, I wasn't an entrepreneur and I didn't have, maybe in that sales gig, I didn't have like 7 or 8-figure potential, I was learning the skills that eventually allowed me to leave and have that potential.
Have you ever read Hustle Harder by 50 Cent?
No.
So when his first album's coming out, he talks about like artists getting dicked around by record companies all the time. He's like, when that first album was coming out and then they delayed it for whatever reason, he went to the company, and instead of demanding they release his album or paying him for more money, he demanded that he said, I will stay on if you make me an intern. So he became an intern, and he like an unpaid intern, and he followed these music executives. Look, 50 Cent didn't start making all this money and becoming this music producer on accident. He did so. It wasn't one of these things where like he just grew up.
He learned by osmosis.
Yeah, he learned by osmosis. He wanted to be around these successful people. This was a crack dealer in Queens who started interning with these record executives to the point to where he knew how to become one of them and how to make deals, what to sit and listen for in meetings. And nobody would think that you're like 50 Cent, you just think is arrogant, braggadocious. No, he humbled himself to become an intern at a record company. Yep. And that's how he got to the point where he is right now.
Well, it's like what Robert Greene talks about with mastery. Yeah. You know, and I think trying to find that apprenticeship phase is so, and it means giving up on your business if you're not that successful, starting off, and just go work for somebody who you really respect. You know, if you can get around, you can learn from, because you're not only going to learn, like let's say somebody who follows you is really passionate about what you do and they're not that successful, but they're trying to start their business. They come be a sales guy for you. Well, they're not only going to learn a lot of stuff from osmosis from you, even more so than your clients are going to learn. Yeah. But at the same time, they're going to be surrounded with a group of people. They're going to have similar goals. And you know, it's the whole average of the 5 people you're around. So yeah, you could be 50 Cent, a crack dealer, or whatever, how he came up. And then he gets around a new group of people long enough, and he starts to learn by osmosis these skills. Because there is certain things that you can only learn by observation and experience and being in the trenches.
Bro, it's so true, yeah.
So like for instance, when I left my sales gig and I started my company, we went from 0 to $2.5 million a month in 26 months. There's only one person I can think of that grew, I think, faster in our industry than that I at least know. And so that is a very, very, very fast clip. And looking back, I think the biggest reason why is because I was part of such a great company before. Like, how do you don't read a book and learn how to run an 8-figure company? But I was a part of one. And I was like, you know, kind of not like I was like the leader of the company by any means, but I was like the top sales guy. So I was like respected, and I was very observant. We had an office. So I knew, okay, like there's a CFO, this is what he does. There's a controller, this is what he does. Okay, they have a client success team. This is kind of how they run. There's obviously I knew how the sales team ran. I was a part of that. I knew all the guys in the marketing department. I could see how the leader led. So even though nobody sat me down and said, okay, cool, like you got to learn how, like here's the 5 principles of running an 8-figure company. When I started doing it, it was just so much more like, I just realized I had already known it. And it's interesting. Like, I will tell you what, I don't know how I really would have learned any of that stuff without that experience. Right. I suppose through a bunch of trial and error, which if I could have like, I would much rather get paid $30,000 to $40,000 a month for 2 years and learn all of the skills that I learned and then start my company.
Yes.
Than maybe make more in the short term, but is not as much in the long term. But most people are not willing to punt the short-term gains for even bigger long-term gains.
For sure. I'll say something, and a lot of people are going to have a hard time with this. They believe that commitment removes their options, and it's the opposite. Right now, so I was a U.S. Air Force captain, and I came out. I have several air medals. I got 450 combat hours over Iraq and Afghanistan. When I got out of the military, did I have more options or fewer options? I had any option. Most universities would have accepted me into their master's or PhD program in 2 seconds. I had more options because I made a commitment. A lot of people, they don't, so I want to be an intern. I don't want to make a commitment. No, when you make a commitment, so for me, a lot of times, like I know what events I'm going to be hosting 3, 4, 5 years down the road. I've already made a commitment to these people. I'm going to do this. Because I've done that, I made a commitment to them. These people now make a commitment to me. It's not an accident I host the biggest beauty pageant, the biggest swimsuit pageant in the world. I do so because all these other people I made a commitment to, when I say, hey man, I need you to come, I need you to help me with this, every single one of them said yes because I made a commitment. And a lot of times the people that I would apprentice me, later on they would make a commitment to me. Yeah. So a lot of people have a very difficult time with that. I think when I make a commitment, I lose all my options. Even is a weird example. Kyrie Irving, he opted into his $36 million contract a couple days ago. Well, actually, he has more options now because now they can trade his contract because now it's fully guaranteed. They know how much it is. Now they can trade it for a light contract. That's the thing people don't understand is like when you make a commitment, you actually become more valuable. Now you have more options instead of losing all these options.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never thought of it as a paradox like that.
Yeah.
But, in terms of what you said and doing those events 3, 4, 5 years and in the future, what came to me is you're sowing the seeds of reciprocity and goodwill that you'll later tap into. And the biggest thing, that, especially when you talk about brand building, which that's something that I haven't put a lot of time and attention in because I'm still running a lot of my company and doing a lot of direct response. But in terms of brand building, a lot of it is just sowing those seeds of reciprocity and goodwill that eventually you can tap into later.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just been an incredible thing for me to figure out, just to have these people like come back, or be willing to help me down the road because I was able to do that thing for them. And just making those commitments, and you become an expert in certain things when you do that. The other thing is like, so for instance, this is something that was hard for me to learn. I was coaching for free for 12 years, man. A lot of people don't know this. 2008, I started coaching, and it was all kinds of lifestyle stuff because I would read 30, 40 books a year, and I'd teach, I'd go make speeches. I'd make speeches all kinds of different places. There's a bunch of self-help programs with me as a guest speaker on it. Up until 2020, then I started my own program. And here's the thing that I learned. When the guys actually put a time, effort, and resource commitment into my program, they did 10x better, right? This goes back to what I said before. When they were not making a financial commitment to my program, what was happening was they'd be like, this is fun till now I've reached a pain point. Now it's time to play video games.
Yep.
And what happened now is like, this is getting harder and harder. Wait a second, I've already invested in this. I got to keep going. I've made a commitment. And now later on down the line, when their social media is blown up and their business is blown up, now I have options. And that's the thing I keep trying to explain to these guys. You have to make a commitment in the gym. You have to make a commitment. I say this, I have a book list. You have to make a commitment to what you read and how you educate yourself. You have to make a commitment to who your partners are. Like, again, I will never, there's not a single client I have who will say, Michael made a claim to me and he did not fulfill that claim. Not a single one, because I made a commitment to them. And some of them are hard. In fact, we had a situation where we switched from one company to another, and I still maintained to fulfill the clients from the previous company, even though I got no money from it. Because there's nothing in the world that was going to be worse to me than there being a client out there being like, well, I gave
your reputation.
Yeah, I gave this dude this money, and then I saw none of the money, Cole, none of it. And I still, 12-week programs, year-long programs, I fulfilled the whole thing, received nothing from it, but I could sleep at night. Yep. But I could sleep at night because I made a commitment to my clients. And because I made a commitment, now I have options. It's very difficult for people to grasp that whole thing. They're like, I don't really want to make a commitment to this thing. It seems too long. I'm not really sure. And then you don't understand. Like for me, I know I'm going to be the host of Swimsuit USA for the next 5 years. Let you know right now, Kathy. I'm going to be the host of Paradise Challenge. I'm going to be the host of Babes in Toyland. I'm going to be the host all these 5, 10 years. Get ready. I'm not going anywhere. And because I do that, I have so many more options. And so that's what I recommend to a lot of people to kind of learn that whole thing. Can we talk about this? You talk about these two things, clarity and certainty. right? You talk about clarity and certain. And one of the things I really liked before is like, I'm explaining to you in the sales process why the thing you did before didn't work. And so now this is why this is going to work. Can you talk about that?
Well, okay. So again, we talked about the two sales you have to make, the sale on the method, the sale on the product, right? So when you're selling on the method, essentially how you do that is when you explain your service of what you have, you want to explain it as the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. So again, that's the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. So how does, I mean, that sounds like a fancy saying. How does that actually look like? So for instance, let's take Russell Brunson funnels, okay? So if you look at that, and I don't think he's thinking about it exactly like the phrase I used, but what he does is he explains the reason you're not getting customers online is you're using a glorified business card called a website, okay? Instead, when you use a funnel, you can get this result, right? That's oversimplification. Another example is the ketogenic diet. Right?
Yeah.
So for instance, if you read a direct response sales letter selling the ketogenic diet, what happens is the first thing they explain to you is why you can't lose fat because of something called insulin resistance.
Yes.
Whether this is true or not, because it's kind of
hold on. Shout out to Greg O'Gallagher. He's coming on Tuesday.
Kind of dicey, but the first thing is you can't lose fat because of something called insulin resistance, which when they say insulin resistance, they're using that as a problem-based mechanism, which is the real reason you can't lose weight, right? The symptom is I can't lose weight. The real reason, insulin resistance, right? So because of that, what we have to do is we have to get in a state of ketosis, which is the solution-based mechanism, so that we can achieve desired result. So by the very nature of somebody reading a ketogenic diet, let's say sales letter, what they've discovered is why they didn't achieve the result in the past, why they failed in the past, and why this is going to be different, okay? And that really produces, you hear, they buy emotionally, justify logically. You know, the reality is that is true, but you need to make an emotional sale and a logical sale. And the logical sale, they have to have that justifying reason of like, oh, like that's why I failed. This is going to be different. There has to be something that's novel and something that's new, right? So for you might say, look, dude, like, you know, you've been trying to attract people into your life, whether that's friends, business clients, whether that's women, et cetera. And at the end of the day, like you were doing some stuff right, but the most important psychological principle from evolutionary psychology is this preselection principle.
There you go.
And you didn't have any of that, right? And when you don't have that, here's what happens. Here's the problem with that. So instead, what we do on the inside with my group, right? So us versus them, tribal mentality, is we really put that at the center and the core piece. Because when you can do that, everything else that you've been trying is almost a natural byproduct of that. It's almost effortless. So then they're like, they can, you know, not only did you elicit all the emotions and the emotions of change and the stories of why this is so important on the call, but then they can have this thing to cling on to when they're nervous of, you know what, it's going to work because of this. It's going to work because previously I was not utilizing pre-selection. Now I am. Does that make sense, right? So there's tons of different things. Like, you know, for instance, when we sell our sales training, we'll say, look, dude, when you're trying to start a business, you have to learn 11 skills at once. Okay. And the problem with that is, you know, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of experience. Like, and then I'll tell my story. Remember, I'm making a claim, and then I tell a few stories and reason why proof to prove that to be true. So I'll say instead, what we do on the inside is we just teach you the most important skill first so you can get your income to $20,000 a month, because guess what? If you're going to start that business, you need to be good at sales anyways. So you see how it's like you always want to frame it again is the simultaneous explanation of why everything they've tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different. And you always tee it up with, this is how I almost explain everything. I say, so the problem with most people trying to achieve X is this, right? Most people out there, they try to do this. Here's the problem with that. And the consequences they experience as a byproduct of that. So instead, what we do is we do method, which allows us to benefit, which means ultimately benefit of the benefit. Does that make sense?
Man, to me, it makes total sense,
so
because
your sales guys should be using that in the pitch. It's like
they are. So here's the thing, man. So all my sales guys have gone through my program. So they've had the life-changing thing. And because of the you know, man, I don't mean to be disrespectful, because I know some of you guys do this, but the trauma release coaches and the dudes who like, they don't get to the fucking gym, bro. I don't know how else to explain this. I'm like, You have to think about your Homo sapien ancestors. Were they rewarded for sitting in the cave and feeling sorry for themselves, or were they rewarded mentally? Did the reward centers in their brain fire when they killed the meat and brought it home and had everyone see them as higher status?
Yep.
What do you think is going to make you happy, dude? It's accomplishing shit. That's what's going to do it. And it's just so hard when I have these guys. And listen, nobody's a bigger fan of Eckhart Tolle than me. I love being in the present moment. I understand that. But I'm in the present moment because I just hit three-pointers in your fucking face. That's why I'm in the present moment.
Exactly.
And a lot of people don't understand. You need to accomplish things. That's what you talk about being in a sales call as being like your meditation. That's exactly like, for me, it's the same thing when I'm on stage or when I'm playing basketball. There's a couple of things, or when I'm doing my calls, my group calls, I'm in a meditation. I go to a place. I'm not even thinking.
Yeah,
I'm just doing.
You're
I'm
totally
just like,
present.
Just like
but
Maverick.
Also, the key thing about the power of now and that type of stuff versus taking action is it's not one or the other. Right? You could take a bunch of action and get the result you want, whether that's in relationships, health, your business, whatever, and be miserable, right? Because of the expectation associated with that. So I think the spirituality and being in the present is really teaching you to be, be content with where you're at, or not fall into this.
To be accepting. It's acceptance. It's acceptance of the present moment. It's a radical acceptance.
Yeah. But that's not going to get you. You're not going to sit there and be really present, and then all of a sudden, like a hot chick's going to fall from the sky.
And that's unfortunately there was that fucking. I'm sorry, I hate to say this because I know it's going to make a lot of people mad. That parasite of a movie called The Secret that just ruined so many people, and it turned all these lazy people into entrepreneurs by believing they're going to manifest shit. The universe is not going to manifest anything for you. You are going to go make things happen. I don't show my clients The Secret. I show my clients videos of Christian Okoye and Bo Jackson. Those guys did not wait for the hole to open. They knocked the motherfucker out who was in front of them and made the hole open. That's why I love showing those videos, right? And that's the thing. And the other thing before we were talking about what didn't work, right? So my sales guys, they've gone through my program.
Right.
The other thing is there's two kind of opposing things. The one I said is the breath movement and the trauma release guys. Again, I'm not saying that's not helpful. For some people suffering from PTSD, you need that. I'm not saying don't do that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is then you wake up and your bank account's not any bigger and your dream girl's not any. Yeah, there's no action at all. And then the other group is the creepy pickup guys. And the problem is, it's not just, I don't even have to say this is why this didn't work. They all know it didn't work. It was a fucking unmitigated disaster for them in their lives. Once they get to me, my sales guy is like, listen, this is what Michael did for me, and it completely changed my life. So the exact thing that you're talking about is exactly what goes on with us, man. We're just like, oh, I did this, this, and this. And then it's like, here's 50 photos of my entire life changing, and here's the huge influencer I'm dating. And it's just like, it's very much night and day.
Well, and the key too is it's helpful for them to understand why it didn't work. So they know it didn't work, but do they know why?
Right.
And that is an education thing. So when you talk about it's funny, like a lot of sales calls are framed as like, these breakthrough calls or whatever. They're supposed to be super valuable. And a lot of times that could be kind of bullshit. But here is a way you can make your sales call valuable is by educating them like, dude, I know you tried that. Here's why it didn't work. And then the people that are successful on the inside, here's what they do and why it does work. And you can explain the psychological principles behind that, which also kind of alleviates the responsibility from them, right? Or alleviates, you probably heard in sales copy, you want to tell people it's not their fault, right? So it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
And so it allows them to think, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. I was just doing the wrong thing.
It's funny you say preselection. That's in the top 3 things we talk about in our sales
Well,
calls.
and the thing is too, like people, I guarantee who aren't working with you, who reach out to you, they start to realize they want to believe that is the reason because they didn't have that, they didn't succeed, right? And so that's the one thing you can leverage, and then they can cling on to that. And they're like, that's why. The other thing I would say too is if your sales team is doing really good, just based on what you told me, I would wager the most important thing that they have is conviction, because they're your clients and you've changed their life. They have their personal story. They are the living proof, right? And now they're making money helping you. It's like there's so much conviction. Like, for instance, we have one of our best salespeople fundamentally is not like the most tactical, best fundamental salesperson like ever, right? But this person is amazingly good, like scary good. And it's because of their conviction, not necessarily the fundamentals. If I had to take somebody who's fundamentally sound versus somebody who has conviction, I would take conviction every single step of the way. Because if you think about somebody who has that conviction and like, let's say this has changed their life so much, are they going to be more or less likely to challenge the person at the end of the call? Are they more and less likely to say, hey, I kind of had these doubts too about X, Y, and Z, but here's what I found. So that is very key. Now, it's not a either or, right? It's both,
Yeah.
right? So you want to be fundamentally sound and you want to have the conviction.
Well, the
piece.
conviction would create the tonality that you were talking about before.
Exactly.
Because it's almost like method acting, right? It's like I'm not acting like a person who's angry. I'm actually angry while I'm talking to you during the scene. And that creates the tonality and it makes it more believable. I think that's the same thing with the conviction. You're exactly right. I've heard these guys on the call and like, yo, man, that thing you just said, it's not going to be a problem. I promise you that it's not going to be a problem. He starts laughing. That's not going to be the issue that you're going to have.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, that's exactly right. Can we talk about this transition language? So before we talked about no problem being a term that you use. The other one was what's next. You transition into the next part because for me, showing people how great my program was not the issue. I'm very open about that. I think as far as the networking social circle product, I think I have the best product in the world.
Right.
The issue for me, and I'm not doing my sales calls, but it's the specifically asking for money. That transition to that next thing, and then you talk about the investment, and I have some homework for you. Can you go over that?
Right. So again, here's kind of the basis of the sales call, right? There's the introduction, right, which is rapport and frame the call. Then there is information gathering, which is essentially asking a lot of questions. We can get into that. I mean, in my methodology, I teach that there's 7 beliefs the prospect needs to have to buy. And what you want to do is you want to ask skilled questions to break down the counter beliefs and rebuild the empowering beliefs before you transition to the close. So in essence, you can create an objectionless close where instead of having to hard close them, they're closing themselves, right? So that's all set up mostly in the discovery or in the information gathering phase. Then there's the transition, which the transition is just an effortless way, a very non-sales pressury way to basically get the prospect to ask you to pitch them, right? Because a lot of times salespeople will do really, really good asking a bunch of questions, and then it's like anvil drop to the pitch. And they're like, wow, I thought this person was really understanding me. Now I'm getting hard pitched. There's like a smooth way to do it. Then you have the pitch, right? The pitch is really explaining the simultaneous explanation of why everything they tried in the past has failed and why this is going to be different, right? So it's walking them through not what you're going to do. Oh yeah, we have a Facebook group. We get together this many times a year. We have group calls. You do need to say that stuff, but that's like 5% of the pitch. 95% should be what we're going to get done, right? It's like the first thing we're going to work on is this. Then we're going to work on this. Then we're going to work on this. And then finally this, right? So usually 3 to 4 kind of steps of what we're going to get done that makes up the thesis, which is again, is that simultaneous explanation. Then, this will answer your question. So then what we do is we do what's called a temp check. So I'll say, gotcha. So, Then we'll start to ask questions about it. So I'll say, gotcha. So we cover those 4 things to be able to get your social life and your social circle on track. In terms of those 4 things specifically, what questions do you have, right? And then they'll start to ask questions. The key here is when they ask a question and see like your guys with a lot of conviction, I bet that they could probably improve on this because when they're so passionate about the product, they want to talk a lot, right? So somebody might say, well, like, do I get to work one-on-one with Michael, right? So what you want to do here is you want to say, you want to clarify the reason why they're asking the question to uncover any hidden objections. So you want to say something like, they might say, do I get to work one-on-one with Michael, right? And you might say, well, Michael is heavily involved in the program, but just so I can answer your question effectively, like, is there a specific reason why you're asking so I can give you the right response, right? And they may say, well, I tried a program in the past. They promised me one-on-one with this guy, and I never got to speak with him one-on-one. Now we can actually formulate an answer that would handle that objection. But if you had said, oh, no, it's all group coaching, I'm out. Does that make sense? So we want to say, what questions do you have? They ask a question. If we don't know exactly why they're asking, sometimes it's apparent. So you don't have to do it every time. But if we don't know why they're asking, we want to say generally blank, right? Or you see how I answered it by saying, well, dude, Michael is heavily involved. See, I didn't really answer the question.
Yeah.
But is there a specific reason why you're asking?
Yeah.
Right. And so now, because like, let's say you do group coaching, for instance. I don't know how your thing's structured.
I do both.
But okay, so you do both, right? And it's like, well, we do so like what I would respond to that then is there's certain aspects of our program that is group and community based because we find that is one of the most valuable parts is getting all these like-minded people together. Because imagine...
I literally say iron sharpens iron. That's literally what I tell them.
Because what you say is imagine, like right now, you said you're really, really struggling meeting women, X, Y, and Z. Well, wouldn't it be helpful for you to hear Michael coach a guy who's 10 steps ahead of you and is already doing what you want to do and he's working on the next problems? Yeah. So we do that because of that, and we do one-on-one based so that you can actually get customized, tailored feedback to your specific situation.
Yeah.
And then I say, does that make sense? And they say, yeah. I say, cool. what else? What are the questions? So that phrase there, what else? What are the questions, is very, very important, because a lot of times what sales trainers will teach is at the point where it's like you give the pitch, and then it's like, let them pull all the questions from you.
Okay.
But what happens is the prospect will then take control of the call a lot of the times. So that little phrase right there, what else? What are the questions? Keeps me in control.
Yeah.
While making sure they're going to ask their questions. So they ask the question, I clarify the reason why they're asking if necessary, then I answer the question. The big thing here is we answer the question in 2 sentences or less, preferably in 1 word, right? So let's say you do one-on-one. I said, do I get to work one-on-one with Michael? Absolutely.
Yeah.
What else? What are the questions? I just answer it in 1 word. Whereas a sales guy, oh yeah, like you definitely do. Like, it's really important, Michael. And then the guy kind of starts to check out, right?
Yeah.
But I want to keep him in the kind of like not in the prefrontal cortex, more in like the limbic.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'll just say 100%. Or Michael does one-on-one with every client, 100%.
Yeah.
What else? What are the questions?
Yeah.
So you see how that's so clean.
Yeah.
So we keep doing that. What else? What are the questions? And we lead through. And then when they say, oh, I don't really have any other questions, say, cool. How do you feel? Like we talked about those 4 things. Do you feel like this is what you need to insert desire? So again, I'm seeing if they're certain if this is the right thing, now is the right time. Does that make sense? And so again, we want to look for the tonality. So if they're like, dude, 100%, this is exactly what I need. Okay, we're good. We can move to the next step. If they're like, I think so, then we got to handle that, right? So let's just say they say, no, dude, like, honestly, this is like exactly what I was hoping it to be. I say, cool. So no questions. You feel like it's exactly what you wanted and what you were hoping for. So what's next? Where do you want to go from here? So I restate, you don't have any questions, and it's exactly what you just said, like you want to do this.
Yeah.
So I restate those 2 things, and then I say, what next? Where do you want to go from here? And I do it as not a, what next? Like, so where do you want to go from here? I'm not like doing it in an upward inflecting tonality. It's actually a direct command, if you notice that. So like when people do this stuff, a lot of times they start to be real passive. No, it's like, what's next? Where do you want to go from here?
So upward tonality would be seeking rapport.
Seeking rapport,
and
right?
You're
yeah. So
breaking rapport.
I'm equal or I'm breaking rapport. Yeah.
Got it.
And then so I say, what's next? Where do you want to go from here? I say, well, like, how do I get started? And then you state the onboarding, makes sense, and then you state the price, right? So I always state the onboarding before I state the price, because the price, we want to have silence afterwards. And what we want to do is we want to state exactly what's going to happen after they buy to raise their level of certainty. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we don't want them to be like, well, I'm going to give this guy my credit card. I don't know what's going to happen next. I like to state, so like you'll process the investment with me. And then from there, what we're going to do is have you fill out some intake information and then essentially pair you up with a one-on-one onboarding call. That's where we're going to go over how often we're going to meet, when we're going to meet, how long we're going to meet, things we need you to do right away, some resources we're going to give for you. So you have a customized implementation pathway specific to you on everything we're going to get done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just filmed my onboarding. So I have an onboarding welcome message that I do, and I describe exactly what's going. You go over with one of my team members.
Yeah,
I didn't know what that was for, to be honest with you, and until you explained it right now. That's awesome.
Right. So we do that, and they say, "Does that make sense?" They say, "Yes." I say, "Gotcha." And the investment's $10K. Right.
Beautiful.
So the key is though,
it's an investment. That's another one.
Yeah. Well,
what was it? What is Jordan Belfort? He calls it a cash layout. And you're talking about it's an investment.
The cash flow,
Yeah.
And you can do some price anchoring stuff here as well. So like for instance, like with our recruiting company, I might say before I say the investment, I like to do I don't like to do the whole like price stacking corny shit.
Yeah.
But I'll find a socially aware way to do it that still works with price, because price anchoring does work. So like for us recruiting, we don't like if you go to a SaaS recruiting firm, they'll charge you like $60K per salesperson placed. Like we don't charge anything anywhere near that. So I'll say so first of all, we're not like a SaaS recruiting firm or something like that. That's not our business model where you're going to pay 40 to 60K ahead. Our investment's actually just blank, right? Actually just 20K, So you see how instead of saying, well, Michael, the investment to grow your business to 100K a month, ultimately 1 million a year and 5 million over the next 5 years is just this. Like, that's kind of like somebody's like, okay, great. Like, am I working with a charlatan or what?
Yeah.
But if I say like, oh, dude, like, so we don't do it like most recruiting firms to where they're charging you this and this per head. We're just blank. You see how that's a little bit more natural? Like,
yeah, of course.
They're not going to think, oh, this guy's price anchoring me. Or even if they did, they'd probably respect the idea that was pretty, like, I at least tried to be socially intelligent there.
Beautiful.
So then we state that,
The other one is, you mentioned this a couple times, is silence. So the idea of you put a statement out there and then you're just quiet and then let the prospect make a statement. What can you talk about that?
Well, I mean, you gotta let the prospect sit in the weight of the pain, right? Like you don't like there's kind of a people have a I'm sure you know this because you teach like social skills and stuff, right? People have a natural discomfort with like silence,
Yes.
right, and just being present, you know. And so the idea is a lot of salespeople will like they'll state the investment's just 10K, and then there's like a little bit of pause and like. And we could break it up into two if you want.
Right,
you know?
right.
And
so you broke first.
Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to wait and just look them in the eye. Which here's the thing is a lot of salespeople. This is the common mistake. They'll be like, well, man, when I'm trying to be silent, they just look at me and they're like, hey, you still there? You know. And that's because what was happening is they got Speedy Gonzalez through the pitch. They were like explaining stuff super fast, and then all of a sudden, and the investment's 10K, and then they just pause, and the guy's like, are you still there? What's going on? But what we want to do naturally as we get into the questions part in the temp check is we want to slow our cadence, right? Because now if we do not want them to get into this is a lot to think about, I am going to think about it, right? Or like, wow, this is a lot to process. Or you ever been in a presentation where there's too many words on the PowerPoint?
Man.
And there's too many words on the PowerPoint and you're like, ugh. That little like, feeling, whatever that is. I should name it so I'm not just, doing it. But that little feeling is like the feeling of like, I'm kind of like checked out, right? Like to where somebody's giving you too much information, they're talking too much, you're kind of like, I need to go. When you can just answer it in one question and also slow the cadence, it keeps them in kind of the limbic, lizard brain type of area, which is where we want them to make a decision, right?
Yeah.
So say the investment, and then, if it comes to something to where like some people who are a little bit more savvy with influence, they will try to out-silence you, okay? So especially if you're really good. It's because they're like, oh, I'm gonna see out. I'll silence this guy. So here's what you do. If you get 8 to 15 seconds in, it depends. Like I watch their body language, but if they're just staring me in the eyes and we're having a freaking staring contest, it's like childish. Then I'm just gonna say, how do you feel? Right. So now they have to break the silence.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll do something like that. But yeah, I mean that's like a 101 thing. But yeah, I mean you gotta like let them kind of figure it out. But you got to make sure you're leading. A lot of salespeople will be silent, but then all of a sudden the prospect starts asking them questions, and it's like they'll ask a question, then they'll ask a question, then they'll be like, and so is this the best email I can reach you at? Okay, great. And is your best website on the or information on the website? Okay, I can watch these case studies. So they start asking these questions, and you can see they're slowly actually taking control of the call.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to be key to make sure that you're still in control while being silent and answering their questions, which is why what else? What are the questions? That little thing right there keeps you in control. I know that sounds kind of like subtle, like it's like so little, but it really, really makes a difference.
Yeah. And the other one you said is, are you ready to start some homework? And this is...
Yeah. So to close, right? So like let's say I drop the investment. I'm like, it's 10K. I'm like, okay, 10K. So I'll just say like, feel good? Yeah. You ready to start some homework? Yeah. What's your billing address? I mean, and then I'm going to start closing them. And obviously, if they kind of start doing whatever, the first thing I'm going to do is, like, it depends on what they say. But again, if I get any resistance at all, I'm going to go back down to, how do you feel about the process? Do you feel like this is what you need to get to the outcome? Right? And then I'm going to try to, like, again, I want to find the objection. And the thing is, there's a certain thing to be said about my mindset when I get on a call is I hope this fucker gives me objections.
Yeah.
Right? Because if I like have this intention of like I am so prepared for any excuse you throw at me, and again, like it's not like I'm gonna like eviscerate somebody who it's genuinely not right for them, right? But if it is the right thing for them and I know I can 100% help, I have this mindset of like I am ready and I hope you give me an objection. Like I am waiting for it. Like I eat this for breakfast. And when you have that energy of being this guy or girl where the prospect's like, man, like this person's just so honest and the type of person that like, I'm not going to get any bullshit by. They don't bullshit you, right? So there's a certain vibe and a certain energy that really, really helps with that. So when you have that mindset of like, I hope they give me an objection. I am so prepared.
Right.
I've done this 1,000 times. You don't get them, right? So that's a very, very interesting little paradox there.
You also say great closers don't get many objections.
Yeah, because they remove the objections before the close.
Yeah. Talk about that, like preemptively going through that.
So essentially, when I first started in sales, I was probably the worst salesperson in existence. And so I was on a sales team too. It was funny. I somehow got on this team. It was a really, really good team. I had some previous business experience, albeit unsuccessful business experience. And all these guys are like door-to-door savages. And so I was the worst guy. And I was very driven though. I definitely worked the hardest. And so what I did is I started reviewing all of their sales calls. And I was figuring that, okay, at the end, there's going to be this verbal judo craziness that they're going to do to get these people to close. And what I found was that there was no objection handling at all. And so that's when I realized there must be something going on the call in the front half that's keeping them from getting objections in the first place. And so that was kind of my first realization. And then later on, so I started kind of like trying to prevent the objections. And then later on, I had a coach who was like kind of an NLP coach. He wasn't really that great at sales, but he talked about something called the belief ladder. And that kind of clicked for me that there's this idea that there's a certain set of beliefs the prospect needs to have to buy. And if we can install those before we make our ask, they're going to buy as a byproduct. And so that was about the extent that he talked. And this was more sales copy based. So I was like, man, that is the same thing for sales. And so I started to ask myself, like, what are the beliefs they need to believe to be true to buy on any given sales call? And I came up with 7. So there's pain, doubt, cost, desire, money, support, trust, right? And so what we want to do is we want to use questions. There's only one. Trust is the only one where we do use questions, but we also do that simultaneous explanation of the pitch. So what we do with the 7 beliefs is we use our questions to break apart the counter beliefs, because every belief they need to believe to be buy, or belief they need to believe to be true to buy, also has a limiting belief, right? So, which is an objection. So what we want to do is we want to ask our questions to build consistency and essentially break down the limiting beliefs, reinstall the empowering ones before we transition to the close. And in an effort, we can create an objectionless close where instead of having to hard close the prospect closes themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that before. That's it, sometimes I've seen it before where a guy gets on the call and they're like, "I'm ready to just buy your stuff."
Right. Well, they have all 7 beliefs.
And my guy's like going through the script, and the guy's like, "Let's just go. I want to buy this right now."
Yeah.
I've been listening to Michael's program for a year. I'm
right.
ready to go now.
So that is the thing is like that person's in what we call the buying pocket.
Yeah.
And
yeah, talk about that, the buying pocket. I love that because I was thinking about that last night. One side is this isn't true, and the other side is I can do this on my own.
Well, yeah. So that's the buying. I kind of refer to it in 2 different ways. But the buying pocket addresses the second belief, which is doubt, right? And doubt means they have to either believe that they can't achieve it on their own, or they have to believe that like it's much more efficient, faster, effective, cheaper, less resources, et cetera, going through a proven process, proven path. Like for instance, if I wanted to do your thing and run, these pageants, for instance, like, dude, I mean, if I took 20 years, like, could I probably figure it out on my own? Like, I'm sure I could stumble through it and somehow figure it out. But like, do I really want to do that? Like, if I really wanted to do it, I would just pay you money.
Yeah.
That it's a more efficient use of my resources.
Sure.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So the way we look at the buying pocket is on the left side, they don't even believe it's possible.
Yeah.
They would say, Michael, like, dude, run an event like that. Like, I could never do it. Okay. On the right side, they could say, oh, dude, that's all it is. Like, I could easily just do that next weekend. So if they're on the right side, we want to ask them skilled questions. And, sometimes they're just so right side that it's just not going to matter. But we want to ask them skilled questions, usually based on their previous track record, to help them see that they have tried to do it in the past and they failed.
Yeah.
If they're on the left side, they don't even believe they can do it. Then you want to tell them stories of people just like them who've been able to do it. So for your audience, right, you're probably not going to get a lot of people who are like, oh, I can just do this next weekend. It's probably
there's a few, and they get, like I said, they get themselves in deep shit because they listened to 80% of what I said. They came on the free calls, they saw a couple things, and then they start copying it. There's a guy who is a photographer right now who's like throwing these events, and he's like, a bunch of the girls are complaining about him because he acts like a creep. I know another group in New York that's doing this.
Right.
They're like doing the 80% solution, and there's these key points that I keep telling them, don't do this, and they're doing exactly what I told them to not do. So yeah, I've had that problem. Like, I'm going to go ahead and do it myself because they just come off my free stuff. And the other one is like, oh, this isn't true. What they believe is, so I'll be out, like my birthday is like 50, 60 girls show up, and they're like, oh, Michael, you paid them all to be there.
Right.
No, I didn't. In fact, I'll give you this, like I posted this before. I was like, I'll give you every one of their social media accounts, and I'll pay you $10,000 if you can find a single girl that I paid to be in any video I've ever done.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
And they're like, they don't know what to do. And then what'll happen is I'll be in like these Telegram groups. I'll get these independent DMs from guys who don't want to just like deal with the haters. And they're like, yeah, man, I want your product. I want your product. That happens all the time. But you're right. It's exactly about the sales pocket. I thought that was really interesting because that's generally where I live is trying to get guys out of one of those two sides. It's usually that this isn't real.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff I do doesn't look real.
I know.
It doesn't
they
fucking look real.
They just don't think they can do it.
They don't think, dude.
The biggest thing
after this, I'm going with a bunch of playmates to a topless pool. Right after we get off of here, and
Nice.
I'm just grabbing the microphone and I'm gonna talk on the microphone. I don't even work there, bro.
Nice.
And they're like, how is that possible? And I'm like, we're just gonna go. We're gonna all go hang out at a topless pool, and then later on, we're all just gonna go party or whatever. And I'm like, I'm just friends with them, and like, if I'm dating them or not, you're never gonna know. And all of this, I didn't pay anyone to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna see if you want to come with me. You want to come? We got till 4. But that's the thing, right? But when I explain it to them, they're like, "That can't. What you're saying, Michael, can't be real. I've been doing cold approach pickup for 10 years,
right.
and pretty girls do not talk to me. And what you're saying is not true. It objectively cannot be true." And then I introduce them to my clients, and like, your clients are in on it too. They're part of this conspiracy. They paid these girls to hang out with them, and I just get this mad hate.
Right. So again, it's the 3 forms of proof, right? So living proof, social proof, which you could tell 2 stories of clients and who are just like them. And you want to know why those clients are able to break through that belief and be successful is they realize this key element called preselection. Then that's the reason why proof. Does that make sense?
Preselection is the one, bro. Preselection is like explains everything. It just really fixes it. It explains everything with sales. You're rather the guy who has the Bentley and the nice teeth, and he wins the award for realtor of the year. And he comes and he sells you a house. Like, oh, this guy probably knows what he's doing. He's probably going to get me the best price. And the same situation with women. It's like you walk in and it's like, who am I hanging out with? These 2 supermodels, and like we're just hanging out, and like the girl is just more likely to be interested. What is going on with this guy? He probably doesn't smell bad. He's probably not a complete weirdo.
There must be something
There's
here.
Something going on here.
And dude, I'll be honest. Like for us, like a big part of why we've been able to explode is one, we have a very valuable service and we give people results. We do what we say.
Yeah.
The next reason is we worked with one big name. And then they told another big name, and they told another big name. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, they've worked with Tony Robbins, Frank Kern, Dean Graziosi. We just talked on Grant Cardone, like just people like that. And then they're like, oh, well, like if people like that, they use the social proof kind of by analogy type thinking. So it's like, well, if they're good enough for X, then they're good enough for X, right? And that's something you always want to leverage in any sort of types of influence.
Here's another one I thought was interesting. I'd heard of an elusive double bind before. You talk about a double tie down.
Yeah, well, that is so that is the gotcha, no problem. So in terms of the process, in terms of those 4 things we covered, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like that's what you need to get to X? That's tie down number 1. They say, oh, dude, Michael, 100%. Gotcha. So that money aside, you're 100% in. That's the double tie down, right? And the reason we want to do it like that is because if I say, like, for instance, if I ask one question about the thing, I can a lot of times trigger an automatic response. So for instance, classic one, does that make sense? Yes. Like, it's just one of those things where it's an automatic response. Okay. But if I want to really get your buy-in on a certain type of thing that I'm pitching you, I might say, does that make sense? You say, yes. So based on what we were talking about earlier with your sales guys not performing at the level that you want, do you feel like this element of the service is going to help you get them to 25%? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, why though? So you see how, like, I just took it from, does that make sense? Yes, to now you got a double tie down, and then you're going to justify why the service is going to be beneficial.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it could be like for your product, it could be like you explain the whole thing about preselection. Does that make sense? Yes. So do you see why, based on how you were doing all the cold approaching and you really didn't have any of this in your favor, do you see how once you can leverage this now, it's actually going to change the game for you and you're not even going to have to do any of that at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We call it arithmetic versus geometric. Arithmetic, like a cold approach is arithmetic. It's 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. Social circle is geometric. It's 2 and 4 and 16.
Right. It's exponential.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Compounds.
Yep, for sure. The other one is you talked about like 5 different lead sources. You talk about paid.
Well, there's 6, right?
6.
And I got this from Alex Hormozy.
Okay.
Who it'd be a good person for you to connect with. He's local. So he's a good friend of mine, and he talks about the 6 different types of lead sources, right? So he says there's paid, it's paid, outbound, affiliates, word of mouth, owned media, earned media, right? And so what I have found through the businesses that we coach, which are typically coaching, training businesses, education businesses, courses, services, agencies, stuff like that, to have a true predictable lead system, at least in the beginning, the best way to do it is through either paid or inbound, right? Because the big thing is to really
Can you explain inbound to audience?
or sorry, paid or outbound is actually what I meant. But inbound's like people are actually reaching out to you and they're raising their hand, asking for information. Opposed to outbound is like, I just cold called you, right?
So today, cold calls. So like for most of my coaching program, we're not probably going to do cold calls. Are we talking about cold DMs on Instagram?
Yeah,
what are we talking about?
It could be cold
email
DMs.
blasts. Is that what we're talking about?
It could be cold DMs. It could be LinkedIn DMs. It could be cold calling. It could be cold texting is illegal, but I guess that could technically be a solution. Yeah. But it wouldn't be like if you opted in for a piece of information from me and then my team cold called you, that is not technically outbound in this definition.
Yeah.
Right? That would be inbound, and then we're phone calling you to follow up. Okay. Does that make sense? So yeah, I mean, outbound works still. It really does. Like, we have an outbound division that does well. Our main stuff is off paid media. The next level, and usually for most people, is brand. Because once you have brand, you can have, which is own media and earned media.
Okay.
You can have a lot more inbound. But for a lot of the companies I teach, like, brand is not going to be something that happens usually overnight for people. So if you're tasked with filling 4 sales guys' calendars, you're probably going to need a little bit of paid media because there's just not enough brand. Now, granted, if you're Graham Stephan and you got 4 million YouTube subscribers and you've built it up, now you want to start a sales team, dude, he's not going to have to do paid or outbound, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's just going to he's probably not even going to make a YouTube video. He's probably just going to hit his list and have literally people full for 4 weeks.
Yeah, I don't even think you need 4 million. I've seen guys that just have like some level of expertise in a small podcast. Like for me, I have 2 sales guys. We're trying to hire 2 more, and those guys are full, and I only have 40,000 followers and 20,000 subscribers on YouTube. Because I'm hitting the right people. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I know exactly.
So all your stuff's off of media that you control.
Almost all of it's earned. That we just started paid.
Yeah.
We just started like recently, and we're learning how to do that. But yeah, recently, right now, like I don't know if you guys saw my IG story. We're trying to hire 2 new sales associates because we don't have enough spots. Like my guys are doing 11 a day. It's like he's getting burnt out.
Yeah.
So
well, you should leverage to do paid. You should leverage IG shoutouts.
Yeah.
Because your Instagram, I think, is already converting, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah. So if your Instagram's already converting and you get more eyeballs on the Instagram, now some people will be like, well, like my engagement technically goes down. And yeah, it does, but you're going to make more money, right? So that would be something to look at.
The IG shout out, somebody else shouting me out? What are you talking about?
So it's basically like when you reach out to those meme pages. And so like right now, we winded it down a little bit because our paid media is doing a little bit better. But we've had probably upwards of like 100 different pages reposting our stuff.
Interesting.
And then driving traffic to us. So it's like, we've gotten anywhere from 50 cents to $1.40 a follower.
I love that.
And then essentially what happens is all we want to do is get them on the page, and then we do 6 posts a day that essentially just kind of like nurtures them / it could be a hard call to action, soft call to action, just posts. I don't have to do anything. My team does it all. And then that drives to a link in bio. The link in bio is a short video sales letter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to give the guy credit who kind of, I don't know if he pioneered it, but he's definitely the best at it. His name is Bashar. So like maybe look him up and see how he does it. But man, he crushes it with that. Like that's his whole business. We do it. I'm a little bit better on the paid media side, like running like a Facebook ad, YouTube ad. Like, that's more my background, running that direct to a VSL and just having real persuasive argument. But if you have something broad, right, a broad appeal, that IG shout out stuff is really good.
Yeah, I haven't done that. Mostly it's link in bio with me, and then it goes to a 7-minute VSL.
Nice.
That's how it goes down my funnel, and then you see 50 testimonials, and they're all video testimonials.
Oh, nice.
For my clients, and
yeah.
and that usually by the time they get to the bottom, it does pretty well. I just recently filmed a thank you message, basically like, show up for the call, or you're never going to get a chance to do this again. Basically, we stole that from Alex Becker, and then there's a couple other things. His
is aggressive.
Yeah, and I like it.
But it's true, man. I mean, the way to frame it too is it's like, okay, so congratulations on this step. You've been through this, and you've booked a call to achieve result, right? And one of the most important things about achieving that result is being this type of person, right? And if you're going to be this type of person shows up to their commitments. They do this. They do this.
Great. Yeah.
So you anchor it with identity, right? Because identity is the highest driver of human behavior.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. But no, we're doing 100K months now, and it's all completely off of organic. right now. Yeah, so that's been pretty cool. The other thing that's been really helpful is so reels 100x. So I maybe get 2,200 views on a reel and 100,000. I'm sorry, 2,200 views on a story and 100,000 views on a reel. I might get 1,000 likes on a photo, and I'll get 8,000 likes on a reel. It's night and day. And so we had a company that all they do is make reels for me now. And they just crank out reels at least, every 12 hours they put out a new reel. And because I timestamp all my podcasts, like there's 2 statements you made, I already know in my head which 2 are going to go up and become TikToks.
Nice.
Those are going to go. I'm going to send them to my team. They're going to make TikToks out of it with the words going on the bottom. And those do really well. The other thing is we're going to ask you if you want to be a collaborator on it. So my audience sees your stuff, because some of my guys will definitely be interested in your product.
Right.
And vice versa. So I'll do that with Greg O'Gallagher. I'm going to do that I already did that with Wes Watson. I did that with Bradley. I did that with all these guys. And so we share. And that is another thing that works. It's not like the paid shout outs. I don't mind when my audience is exposed to other coaches, because what I do is so unique that that's ancillary.
You've created your own category, right?
Correct.
So one of the most important things about, especially in any space, is being the first person who does X.
Yeah.
Right. And
I'm not the first person to talk about X, but I'm the first person to do X. Yes.
To do X, and also do it at a level of popularity to where you're the first credible source. Right?
That's exactly
so. For
right,
instance, I'm not the first person to do sales recruiting in the high ticket industry, but at the same time, I've definitely reached a critical mass of being when people ask where do I get good salespeople, usually the next question is, have you talked to Cole Gordon's team?
Yeah.
Right. So it is good to position yourself so you're the only person, or you own a category of X, which like you said, you've done.
Yeah.
So you can share. You don't have to worry about, especially with your market. It's good if they pick up an income making skill, or if they get fit through a different coach, et cetera. Right.
Yeah.
It's synergistic.
I have clients that are always asking for permission, so I make them watch Wes Watson. I have clients that are
intense.
Yeah, I have clients that are they're like, I don't know what I need to do. I'm probably going to recommend you and Nick Cosman as far as sales and sales letters. Learn how to do that. It's this one skill I can do from home in my mom's basement. I don't have shit. I don't have a degree. I don't have any money. If I could just spend a year learning how to write dynamic sales letters, that's going to get me to 6-7 figures, right? Yeah. That would be the thing that I would tell them. And then, as far as I'm still talking to, Wes talks a lot about macros. We're going to have a conversation next Tuesday with Greg Kinobody about macros. That's another thing where a lot of times I will refer them to an expert when it comes to this. Yeah. But as far as what I do, I'm not ever worried about. I've never lost a client because somebody else was like,
they're using you as a point of value. It's in social circle stuff. Do you want to be the person who everybody's me, or do you want to be the connector?
Yeah, the connector. Not only that, is I express to my clients to always be learning, and then I do a podcast, and I analogize this podcast to Think and Grow Rich with Napoleon Hill, where Andrew Carnegie says, I'm going to give you access to these people. You will make no money from this, but you get to keep the information. That's what the Michael Sartain podcast was. That's all it was. Is for me, is I'm going to get access to these people. And I also want my clients to see, I will keep learning, and you should keep learning also. Does that make sense? A lot of times with gurus, I am a guru, so the learning has stopped. I am a guru, so the learning has. This is a major problem with guys who were doing pickup back in 2005. Yeah. They're doing shit that does not work at all, and they've completely foregone social media. And it's just watching them just with their pink boas on. They look like a disaster because the learning had stopped. Do you understand what I'm saying? And so, for me, the learning never stops, and that's what I express to my clients. Plus, I require them all. There's a 26 book list. I make them all read, and they have to go through it. And I express to them, I encourage them to go at 1.7 speed. Try to push to 2.0. That's what I try to encourage them all to do, and then take notes. So yeah, that part's really awesome. And then I really did like the point where you're talking about paid traffic, earned traffic. So earned traffic is kind of where the direction I'm going right now. Right. I'm trying to work on that. The paid, we're learning. We're doing A/B samples. This is the last 2 weeks, from what I understand, we're doing really well with the paid traffic. I'm starting to walk through casinos and getting recognized. We're like, dude, you're the MOA guy. I used to be something different, but now the guys are actually recognizing me from the commercials. So that part is really cool. So hopefully we grow and learn a little bit more about that. The other thing I want to talk about was, so we already talked about listen to wins a day. This one I really loved because I think in one of your things you did mention Jocko Willink. So Jocko, I think, is the only other guy that I feel like is teaching leadership like what I teach. I have an entire pillar on leadership, which is when one of the main things is taking extreme responsibility.
Right,
it might not be your fault, but you're going to fix it. It doesn't matter if it's John's fault or Jack's fault. John and Jack, all that matters is, you know what I'm saying? Like if something goes wrong with the airplane and we end up crashing, you know what I'm saying? And I eject, I still got to write letters to people's families. It doesn't make any difference. It was my fucking fault. So don't make it your fault. Take responsibility for it. So in this situation, you said you take extreme responsibility for your sales numbers. I love this, right? Your sales number, this is an issue that I've had with previous companies where it's like, I'll go on a big podcast and we'll have a boom in sales. And the guys are like, yeah. And I'm like, we got to work on paid because we can't just expect me to go, we can't expect me to go on a huge podcast every week. We have to take extreme, just because I got lucky and I went on this big, huge podcast, we can't say, well, then we're going to have these huge sales numbers every week. We have to have these automatic things. So you talk about taking extreme responsibility for your sales numbers.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, you know, it goes both ways, right? So the first thing you said about the paid is it's super, super important to have day-to-day sales, and also paid traffic is harder. Like, I'll just tell you this. Like, for instance, if one of your followers reaches out to my sales team about becoming a salesperson, right? That we would consider that like the warmest all-time lead.
Yeah.
Right. And so your sales guys might be used to a lot of people like that. Whereas sales teams that are trained on cold traffic, that is like playing in the NFL. Like that is hard, you know? So it's good to have the baseline there in terms of day-to-day sales. And then any sort of like big, like, you know, let's say you get on Grant Cardone's podcast, that would just be a massive bonus.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And I think that's part of the reason why either cold outbound or paid media is a great base. Not that you have to use it, but it's a great base if your earned media isn't huge. Now, the other thing is in terms of extreme responsibility of sales numbers. So the salespeople need to, like if you're going to be just a player, next level salesperson, you need to treat your sales job like it's a business under the business. Right? Like you have your book of business. It's just, you control all your destiny. There's too many salespeople who are like, yeah, like it's the leads or it's the volume and it's this. And even if that is true, because let's be honest, like at the end of the day, I mean, if you're given 100 leads in a week versus one, okay, you're going to make more money with 100.
Yeah.
But even if that is true, does that belief serve you? Right? That,
Right, no.
the quality or the volume or whatever dictates my success. Your belief should be, I control my destiny, I control my outcome, and no matter what happens, I can go out there and I can find a deal. I might not be able to hit 10 deals in a week like the week that Michael went on that podcast, but I can hit 5 or 6 without very many calls on my calendar. So you have to have that extreme responsibility. And, you know, at the end of the day, like what I teach my people is similar to what John Wooden says, is to go to, you know, you want to rest your head on the pillow every single night, knowing that you did like you gave your true fucking best.
Yeah.
Like you did everything in your power to do your best. Now, what does that even look like? So it's like on every single consult and sales call that you had, did you execute it like 100% to the best of your ability and truly hold the person accountable, right? Did you help them align their actions with their words? That's number one. Number two is, and this is the big thing, when you didn't have the consults, right? Okay, you had 3 sales calls this day. What did you do with the other 3, 4, 5 hours of the day, right? And that's the big one.
Yeah.
How many outbound dials did you make? Did you work your pipeline, et cetera? And when I was selling full time, I'll tell you this, like the reason I was as good as I was not because I was like this crazy magician one call closer, which I was as good as anybody at closing on the first call. But what I will say is in terms of working pipeline, people who weren't ready to buy, creating relationships, you know, prospecting my own leads, that's what really put me over the top. And it took a lot of fucking work. But no matter what happened, I knew, man, the leads could go away. I could still pull a couple of deals. So there just has to be that extreme responsibility that there's this projection each week that I'm going to hit no matter what, even if shit hits the fan. Like it's my worst case scenario. And when you have that mindset, even though it isn't entirely true, like yes, some of your results do depend on the lead quality and do depend on the lead flow. So even though that is not entirely true, it is a belief that serves you. And I'll tell you this, there was one time when this really broke through for me, I was really behind on my numbers this one month as a sales guy. I had one consult that day. And I needed to hit 3 deals that day. I had one consult. I closed that guy. And so that was it. I had one sales call. I still hit 2 more deals that day, right? There's another day. So that was like the big breakthrough of like, I don't need calls on my calendar to be able to close.
Got it.
Right. So I was calling my pipeline. I was calling new prospects. I was same day setting for myself, then closing people. And I mean, that sounds crazy, but if you really commit to it, you could do it. Then the next thing is one of the worst days as a salesperson is Memorial Day, because everybody schedules and then forgets that it's Memorial Day.
Yeah.
So like I had Memorial Day, had 6 no-shows, literally 6 no-shows, hit 3 deals. So I had 6 calls, 6 no-shows. So no calls from the marketing on my calendar. Hit 3 deals, right? Because hit pipeline. I mean, I hit up anybody I had a deposit from. I hit up anybody who I talked to in the past, and I just started hitting the phones, right? So I just took massive amounts of activity. And dude, most salespeople just don't do that. You know, it's like, and part of the appeal is like, well, you know, I got into this because, you know, I wanted inbound leads put on my calendar, which is great, right? Like, you should be grateful for that. However, like, I got into this to be the best.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you're not going to be the best unless you're spending that downtime working your own leads, working your pipeline, all of that stuff.
I am a former U.S. military officer, and I'm a former aviator. So to me, we have to prepare for emergency situations. That is, being an aviator, 80% of your training is emergency situations. Now, 80% of your flying is just straight and level. But it's one of these situations where I'm sure my sales team is the greatest. I mean, these guys are closing 40%. Like, it's ridiculous. When I talk to them, I know they get annoyed. Because we'll have a boom month, and I'm like, bro, what if all this goes? I'm always like, what if all this goes away? What if all this shit goes away? What do we do now when all this? What is paid perfect? Are we perfect on? And I know it. I know it's annoying to them, but I know that in the end, like, I want to be like a player on Madden. I want to have at least an 80 in every single category. I don't want to have a 26 on strength and have a 99 speed. I want to be, I want to have all these different things. So the earned traffic and the paid traffic, I want to be able to do both of those things. So when I listen to, go ahead.
I was going to say, and the other thing too is if you get paid media dialed in, what you're going to find is your content and your earned traffic will get better.
Yeah.
Because you don't have this thing where you're like, well, I got to kind of like sneak a call to action in here because of the calendar's a little bit light. So what happens is naturally you'll focus more on serving through your earned media because you don't you're kind of capitalizing on the paid media.
Yeah.
So that really does help because it takes a little bit of pressure off.
One other thing I love, and I'm having this horrible problem. We finally hired somebody to do my reels because I was doing them and I was banging them. Dude, I had reels, hit 400,000, 500,000, 700,000 views, and I'm like, okay,
Nice.
I'm the only person who can do these. I'm the only person who gets my own humor. I'm the only person who gets the jokes, and we finally hired someone to do it. And I'm so happy because you say founders think that I'm the only one who can do this. Now you're talking about sales calls, right? Now I never really did that, but like. We also have to find other coaches, and I'm having a hard time turning the keys over, even though there are guys in my program who are fucking wizards. And I really should allow them to just be coaches and turn this whole thing over. How do you get over that, man? Because I'm still having a hard time with that, where I'm still editing my podcast, I'm still doing all this stuff that I should really be delegating to somebody else.
Right. You gotta take inventory of what you're doing, right? So like for instance, editing a podcast is something that could go pretty soon.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can create an SOP on that, videos of like your preferences, what's important, teach somebody how to think about it. Yeah, they're gonna mess it up a little bit at first, then that could go soon.
Well, my concern is I have so many controversial people that come on here, and they say things that sometimes are. Like if Vegas Dave comes on here and he starts basically just like slandering somebody, right? I'm not saying Dave would do this, but like Dave sometimes he'll just tell some guy to fuck off on my podcast. And I have to be careful because I need this person to understand. Or another thing, man, I will not let any dude come on here and brag about some dude some girl he had sex with that is never going on my podcast. I'm blanking those names out.
Yeah.
And so those are the little things I need my people to understand. But you're right about the standard operating procedures.
Right. Well, there's going to be those nuances with everything, right? So, I first take inventory, and then I would really just figure out, like, number one, what is the highest leverage things that I do? What is like the most revenue per hour things that I do?
There you go.
Like for you, I would imagine like if you make a VSL for paid media, or if you make a podcast, or if you make content, or that's like your highest leverage stuff. Like even coaching your clients in the group format, that's probably the highest leverage stuff,
it is
right?
For sure, yeah.
So you kind of take it, you take inventory, and then it's like, what's the highest revenue per hour? What has the highest leverage? You kind of rank these things out, and then just slowly but surely you give them away. I think the big thing is, like, for instance, giving away, let's say, your fulfillment to your clients. I think the big thing that'll help you get over it is it doesn't have to be a light switch to where it's like, hired a bunch of people, now I'm out of fulfillment. It can be more of like a volume knob in the sense of like, you can be like, okay, well, right now I do one-on-one calls, onboarding calls, and group calls. Well, let me just do the onboarding call and give away the one-on-ones to a dedicated coach and then still do the group. And then eventually maybe you give away the onboarding, then you still do the group. You know what I mean? And then eventually you're like, dude, this guy's a savage. I can just have him do, instead of I do 2 group calls a week, I can have him do 1 group call a week. And so that gradual progression like that is typically the best. And the nice thing is too, because you're still semi-involved, you'll be able to have a very, very easy feeling of like quality control.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you'll be able to see, because the last thing you want to do is like, okay, you get out of fulfillment, you hire 2 coaches, you hire, you know, they're doing everything, you're not doing anything anymore. And then you kind of peep back, you know, behind the curtain 3 months later, and everything's gone to shit, like your client culture shit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this nice gradual transition.
I don't think I can ever get out of fulfillment, man. I'm addicted to it.
Well, yeah, and dude, that means you should do it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things in my company that I do, and I could give it away, but it's not really bottlenecking the company, and it gives me fulfillment. Does that make sense? So it's like for instance, when we have huge clients come on that are like really, really big names, I could assign one of our coaches to work with those people, but like I kind of find it interesting to work with like, you know, Tony Robbins' team, for instance. You know, that's fun for me. So you don't have to give everything away, but also you need to balance that with like, you know, if there's something that's bottlenecking the entire company, then, you know, you should probably give that away.
I love these ads, these videos that you did on Instagram. There were reels where you would take a viral TikTok where somebody had some scheme on how to make money, and then you go, I have a better way of making money. I thought those were great because you're already taking something you know went viral, and then you're putting some on the end.
The real benefit of that is I just like didn't have time to make reels.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't have any, like, you got a bunch of long form content you could splice up. Like I was just in a place at the time, and even still now, to where there's a few projects I got to get out of the way that are really, really important until I can kind of go back into YouTube video, podcast, content type mode. And so, the nice thing about that is it's funny. I was making all these reels, like sitting in front of the, you know, my phone, and here's 3 tips to blank. And those are great. And then I was like, man, I don't have time to do these. And so I saw another guy doing kind of something similar to what I was doing.
Yeah, reaction.
And I was like, oh, interesting. He doesn't have to do any of this stuff, right? Like he's not sitting in front of the camera at all. Like his video team is doing this. And that really appealed to me because it didn't have to be me. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So it's like, I really like that. And then, so we started testing it because I was like, well, now I don't have to do it. So like, we'll test it, see how it goes. And then it worked better. It worked crazy. Works way better. So it's like interesting. Like now I get like 200,000 views. Before I was getting like 10K.
Isn't it funny how, like, you know, I have friends of mine that do these incredible 2-minute videos with tons of jump cuts, and then I'll do one video of somebody holding an iPhone and me walking down the stairs with a bunch of girls. It gets so many more views, and there's no edits whatsoever. Yeah, that was interesting. I was saying you and I should do one where I'm like, so just for those of you who haven't watched, go watch on his reels. They're really funny. It's a girl's like, oh, I can make $30,000 a month by doing this,
like,
this, and this.
Yeah.
And then I can make, and then there's some dude who's like, I came up with this great idea to sell these things. And it's like, I got a better way of making money. I was going to do one. I was like, me and my homie sell crack on the block. There's no tax. You know, we don't have to pay taxes. It's a lot of fun. You get all this money. And then also the gunshots rang out and he goes, I've got a better way of making money. I was thinking you and I should do one like that. It'd be pretty funny.
Yeah.
That'd be hilarious. All right. So one other thing I want to ask you, and your work-life balance. So when we had Nick on here, he was talking about the first couple months, the first 3, 4 years, he's like, nothing but work. He's like, there was no work-life balance. It's like, until I've accomplished something, I'm not going to stop. He talked about then he had to take some time off. He said he had to take some time off, and then he came back and he worked. Did you have a similar experience? Was there a point where it was just nothing but work for a while, and then you transitioned?
Yeah, I love work, man. So for me, to be honest, I will say, like, the only true sabbatical that I've had was when I left my sales job. I took like maybe 45 days off before I started my company.
Okay.
And that was a great time, actually. You know what's funny is like just the amount of like social life stuff I did just was like, it just puts you in a different energy. I was just like loving life and having a great time. But since I started my company, I've been pretty nose to the grindstone. Like I don't take very many vacations. You know, for me, I take more like, I'll take like, you know, this weekend, for instance, you know, me and like 10 of my friends came out for the UFC and just to like party and stuff. That's like a 3-day weekend. And for me, that's like kind of like time off in a sense, but I don't take a whole lot of weeks, but I love what I do. Right. So like if your work is play, then you don't need to take a break from it. Like imagine like you really like basketball. So imagine like you're this 16-year-old kid and you really fucking love basketball. So you're getting up before school and you're shooting hoops. Then during lunchtime you go shoot more hoops. Then you have your basketball practice, you shoot hoops. Then you come back home and you're shooting hoops, right? Like nobody would look at that kid and be like, you need basketball life balance. Like you need to no parent would like rip his basketball out of his hands and be like, you need to like go make some friends. Like nobody would. It's like it's play, right? And they would think of that as a positive thing. But then when it comes to working on a business, people all of a sudden think that is toxic.
Yeah.
If you just love working on your business, you wake up and you're so excited to work on your business, you work on it at 5 a.m.
You know what else they think is toxic is a lot of you guys make so much money and then you want to make more money. And they're like, wow, how much is enough?
Well, it's like fun. It's fun. Well, there's no, like, I mean, what is really enough? Enough is enough to put a roof over your head and be able to eat and be able to like sustain and have a decent amount of optionality, right? So money just gives you options.
Yeah.
But even more than the money, I do it for like challenge, to have a worthy challenge, right?
Yeah.
To have a worthy challenge, to challenge yourself, to see what you're capable of. It's also a great vehicle for personal development, and it's ultimately fun. Like it's fun to get a group of people together and go after a vision and a mission that is enticing.
Yeah.
That is like, there's nothing more primal than that. Like if you go back to the savannah, you were getting a group of people together and they're like, we're going to fucking spear down this elephant.
Yeah.
Like that, there's something about our nature.
Yes.
And obviously we're not going to go down spearing elephants, but what we can do is say, hey, our mission is to produce and empower world-class salespeople to work with the best sales teams in the industry and to really raise the standard of what sales is.
Yeah.
And really bring it back to a profession people can be proud of to actually get into from even a very young age, opposed to something that they fall into. I can get a group of people like that together and we can be excited about the impact we're making. There's something really primal about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really fulfilling. And I think that at the end of the day, I don't know, I just don't take a lot of breaks. Would it probably do me good? Yeah, but I don't know.
I got the same answer as you, man, because some of the most compelling video in my sales letter is me at the Playboy Mansion, right? So think about that, right? Would that be, for most people, that's vacation. Go to LA. Crystal Hefner's a friend of mine, so she would invite me to the Playboy Mansion. And I would go in there but I'd have footage of me with celebrities and playmates in the Playboy Mansion, which then goes in my VSL. Just shows irrefutable visual evidence that this is a lie. And like, it actually helps that I don't have a blue check mark and 1 million followers. It's like, I'm not that big of a deal and I still get these perks because of the network that I can teach you how to build. And this is why this will work.
Well, you've integrated it. Right?
Exactly.
So it's work-life integration. I know that sounds cliche, but it's so true.
But there's nothing else, right? The bikini competition, like that has gotten me so many clients, right? I'm going to host Swimsuit USA's World Championship in October, and I'm going to Mexico to do it. And I'm going to go there, and I have to wear a suit. It's an actual pageant. I got to ask questions. Do you want world peace? All that kind of stuff. And we get so much incredible footage because it's all the Australian girls versus the American girls, and they do tug of war. And it's it is such an amazing visual to see it. And then I show my friends, and I'm like, afterwards, I'm like, this is the world I live in. Do you want to come live in this world? And then I introduce them to 50 other dudes who've done the same thing. And it's just very hard, after a while, you start to see, okay, I haven't been on vacation. I realize I haven't been on vacation in 10 years.
But you're not even thinking about it.
I'm not even thinking about it.
I don't go through my day thinking like, well, I'm really looking forward to this vacation.
I can't do
that.
Like,
I go through my day and I think like, man, I'm really excited for when we launch this new VSL and it's going to like.
It's exactly how I feel, bro. Yeah, These guys are like, I went to Wyoming to go backpacking by myself. I'm like, how did you make money backpacking?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
But the key is a good work-life integration. Like what's interesting for me is that like, I'm probably the most fulfilled and happy I've ever been in my life, but I also work probably the hardest. But I've kind of gotten to it in a place where over time, when I moved, so I grew up in Ohio, and then I moved to Nashville, lived there for 2 years. Then I moved to San Diego for a very, very small time. Then COVID hit. Then I moved to Arizona. I've been in Arizona ever since. And throughout that time, I had met so many people through like online, just peers and online business stuff. To where when I moved to Arizona, I knew a bunch of people who lived there who had similar businesses as I. So that was the first time ever where I truly had a friend group where everybody understood what I did.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I know that sounds kind of like, some people might not get that, but when I lived in Nashville, nobody understood what I fucking did. It was like, they were like, you do, okay.
You're in the Tootsies in Nashville explaining a sales funnel in your squeeze page. They're like, what are you talking about?
They're like, you're like a scammer.
Yeah.
Right? And they're so, what everybody is always, so it's an MLM. I'm like, there's nothing about it that's MLM at fucking all. Like, you know what a salesperson is. We train salespeople. So, when I moved from there to San Diego was a little bit better, but Arizona, it's like everybody gets it. Like they get what you do. And then what happens is like you go out to dinner and like, you might talk about business, you might not, but like it's just all integrated. It's like your friends get what you do. Eventually, like, even like the people you're dating get what you do.
Yeah.
So like it really, really helps, and also even like my team, a lot of them are in Scottsdale or in Arizona. And so we'll hang out with my team, but it's all, it's all integrated. Like we enjoy hanging out with each other.
Yeah.
So I think it's good. I think everybody should
Yeah,
strive for something like that.
that's my answer too when I answer, because I know some people, the work-life balance thing is a question. They talk about mental health, and I'm like, so I learned finance from a guy named Tom Sosnoff who owns Tastyworks. He sold Tastyworks for $1.1 billion to IG Group. He's their largest shareholder now, and then he sold TD Ameritrade's platform called Thinkorswim. He sold that to them also.
Yeah.
So Tom and I talk all the time, and Tom hasn't taken a vacation. I mean, he has to go to a wedding every once in a while. He just hates it. He just wants to. He's on the air for 4 hours a day on his financial network. He's like, that's all he wants to do. He takes no time off. He's 65.
Well,
65
that's
years old.
how you find presents.
He just never takes off. Like that's his vacation. He comes out here for a work trip and he's just like hanging out with me, and he's still talking to clients. Like he just never stops. And I feel the same way. It's like, for me, I'm either doing stuff for my clients or I'm creating content for my business, and that's what vacation to me is going to Paradise Challenge with 200 girls. That's vacation to me. I can't imagine.
Well, the great thing is too, when you do that, you're actually living what you're teaching.
Yes.
So you're actually, which is very interesting. Like the person who I kind of think about who has like that even more, like just as much alignment as that, is Tai Lopez.
Yeah.
Because he had a way of just integrating. I don't know him personally, but I have a few friends who know him really well. And they always say, like, dude, that guy is the best I've ever seen at like just integrating like everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to live.
There, he put a basketball in his house. A basketball court in his house. I would come over to his place. Everyone else is like, Tai, I got this business idea. Tai, I need you to look at my sales presentation. Tai, can you introduce me to so-and-so? And I was like, Tai, I just want to come over and hoop. He's like, dude, can I just come hoop? Because I can't find a place to hoop in LA. I hate playing basketball here. He's like, yeah, man, come over, and we would just play basketball together.
Nice.
Like it was just very different. But you're right about the integration. It was like all these things. Dude, another guy who's just as good as Dan Fleyshman. Dan Fleyshman is the ultimate connector. The only other person who I think could teach my course, maybe not parts of my course, better than me would be Dan Fleyshman. Dan is not as ostentatious as I am. He doesn't work quite the same way. But as far as connecting human beings to one another to make deals in this influencer space, there is no one close to Dan Fleyshman.
Yeah,
no one.
That's what I've heard. I'm actually in his mastermind. I'm going for the first time next weekend.
Yeah, he's great. He has me speak at the elevator night stuff. And he's great. He's awesome. I host all of his charity events. I host the red carpet for his charity events. That's how I met him. But yeah, he's terrific. One more thing. So you talked about the two businesses in Closer.io. I think a lot of people who probably didn't understand before, sales trainer, all that kind of stuff. Explain real quick. The first business does what? Is it B2B, and the second one is where you're training people?
There's a B2B and B2C. So the B2B essentially works with coaches, consultants, course creators, agencies, high ticket services. I mean, we could work with SaaS companies, but the reason I don't market to them is so many don't have product market fit yet, and they kind of got to have product market fit before they can work with us, and there's just not that many out there. So we work with basically high ticket service providers, right? $3,000 ticket plus. And what we do is we help them staff their sales teams. So we'll do done for you recruiting, but then we'll also license my sales training to their entire team. And then we provide one-on-one support, not just for their sales people to continue to get better, but also for the business owner to become a better sales leader and ultimately a better leader in general.
Okay.
So we'll continue to help them. And like what we do is we typically take people in for the sales, fix that problem, and then start to help them with marketing, with operations, with finance. Like a lot of my companies, they'll come in at, let's say...
Do you do placement yourself? Do you have your own sales recruiting force?
We interview like 700 salespeople a month.
Okay.
Yeah. So we kind of do all this heavy lifting and kind of filter everybody down and then place with the best ones that we have. And so essentially, a lot of people will come in at, let's say, 50 to 100 grand a month. It varies. So like it could be 50 to 1.5 billion. But like, for instance, they come in at 100 grand a month. The founder's taking all the sales calls themselves. We'll help them get their first 2 salespeople on board so they can delegate the sales calls. Then they'll have this explosive growth. And at that point, they might need to re-innovate their marketing. They may need to, a lot of times they need to hire like an operations person or a couple people, hire a controller for their finances, hire more fulfillment coaches, start to actually create a business and an asset, not like them just making money.
How do you guys, are you guys taking a percentage, or you have a flat fee?
No, it's just
How
a
does it
flat
work?
fee. Yeah.
You have a flat fee, and then for your staffing and for your training.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And
So
then
we don't do it per head, not percentage or anything like that. It's just like one fee.
1 fee per head.
No, just one fee, just
total.
for everything. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Awesome, man. That's really good to know. Second thing is the sales training that you would give to that you license them. That's the second business, and that is actually you teaching people individually.
Yeah. So that's one business, and right? That's B2B, and then on the B2C side, what we do is we take somebody who either is in insurance or real estate and wants to get into high ticket sales because it's just a better gig overall, or somebody who like they're just really driven and they just want to learn the skill. So they might not have any experience at all, but they're really, really driven and they want to learn the skill. And what we'll do is we'll take that person, they go through a certification process that's not just like a bunch of videos. Like we actually work with them, role play with them. They pair up in pods and all this different stuff. So it's an intensive training process. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll help them go out there and either get their own position or we'll place them ourselves. So what happens is we have both, obviously one more placing salespeople, one more training and helping them get placed. So there's a network effect to where when one gets stronger, the other gets stronger. So yeah, those businesses go pretty well together. But we do, not everybody we place, this is a big misconception, not everybody we place is from the certification. So we still headhunt great salespeople and still place them with our clients because, especially with the certification, if somebody is coming in with no experience at all, and we have somebody who needs somebody who's like this just absolute trained assassin, that's just too big of a gap. Right. So we'll find somebody who is an assassin and then we'll place them in that role. But the certification people do really, really well. So like just, if you come in and you want to learn sales, you spend several $1,000s on yourself and invest in yourself, and you've gotten all that buy-in of I'm going to learn this skill, I'm going to figure this out.
So if I take your course, you may be able to place me in addition afterwards.
Yeah.
It might not just go from.
So what we do is we'll give them access to our Rolodex, but then we'll teach them how to go out there and start conversations with business owners to get placed. And I really want to. So we kind of give them the fish, but we also want to teach you how to fish because I don't want you to come in and be like, well, Cole's team didn't place me, so like I guess this didn't work. It's a scam. It's like no, it's pretty easy to one get the certification, get all the training, and then go out there and line yourself up with 10 different positions and then pick the best one. But then also, we also always have demand with our clients, so we'll place people that way too.
Beautiful. Cole, this has been the fastest 2-hour interview I've ever done. I'm not gonna lie, I did not even realize that we'd done that. That seriously, I thought we'd been on for less than an hour. That's awesome, man. Thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Where can people find you?
Closers.io or Cole Thomas Gordon on Instagram.
There you go. Awesome, man. I'm excited. I'm gonna definitely have a lot more questions for you off air. Because, like I said, we're looking for salespeople with my team. I'll tell you from my standpoint with the Men of Action program, I thought the leads would break down first, right? So you have fulfillment. You ain't never got to worry about fulfillment. I will work all fucking day.
Right.
I will do 7-hour calls till everybody's question is answered. This is my passion. Nobody, never gonna have to worry about fulfillment. Then after that was, obviously we're gonna have different types of traffic, different type of leads. So it's going to be paid. Well, we're working on paid. The organic stuff, I knew I was going to have a lot of organic. For like our first 3 months, we did 100K each because I had so much pent up demand for my program.
Goodwill.
People have been asking me for 10 years to make a program. And then after that, it was like, okay, now I got my sales team. Well, we found some killers. We found 2 murderers. These guys are really good. So I got lucky there. And then as far as my sales funnel, I happened to have a guy, literally dude was sleeping on my couch and just trained himself into making incredible, and Nick Cosman, he's one of Nick, he follows Nick Cosman. He trained himself to write these VSLs, and so he comes and he does them. I change a few things, but he's a genius at this. So we have this really great sales process. What I thought was going to run out was the leads. What ran out is that I don't have enough salespeople. That it was like a complete. Yeah. I didn't expect that. And the other thing was creating organic traffic using TikTok and Reels. I didn't expect that to work so well. It really worked well. And then me going and visiting on other podcasts. I would say the single best bonus lead source. Like I can have a month where the majority of my leads will come from one podcast. Wow. For a month. Now, it's not continual, but for a month, I will tell you right now, no doubt whatsoever, I've made $200,000 to $500,000 just off the Bilzerian interview. It just because of the leads. Because
exactly. That guy's got the craziest traffic I've ever seen.
Of course, yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, like I forget. I heard somebody talk about this. Maybe it was Dan on your podcast or something, but he was saying that like Bilzerian has what 30 something
Oh
million.
no, you're talking about Dan Fleyshman. Dan Fleyshman was talking about all the people who watch Dan's stories who don't follow him.
Yeah. So his distribution is even bigger than you think it is.
Yeah. What he'll do every month or so, he'll screenshot his engagement on all of his stories, and they're like incredible, like higher than Ronaldo, like unbelievable numbers on his engagement.
That is nuts.
And then here's what he's been recently doing. He's been screenshotting engagement from Nike. And these other big companies, and he's mollywopping them, and they're paying for traffic, and he's getting more traffic than them.
Yeah,
so
that's the big thing. I mean, dude, personal brand. I mean, and this is coming from a guy like I haven't put a lot of time into mine, but that's going to be the next big season for me. Is I'm basically rewriting and launching a new VSL because our other one's 2 years old, but it's done over $20 million. So I mean, it just needs a little bit updated.
Yeah.
Once I get that done, I got to go all in on the brand because of stuff like that. Like I'm not going to get to his level per se, but at the same time,
the brand is for trust, man. None of you.
And
you're
also
a man.
like the distribution. If you really build it, the distribution you can get and the amount of traffic and how good it is just off the chain. Man.
Yeah.
And it is for trust too, because people will see your ads and then they check you out, they follow your Instagram for a little bit, then they buy.
Yeah.
So you gotta. It's kind of that like long tail type of approach as well.
We don't get a ton of leads from this podcast, but everyone who buys watches the podcast. That was the one thing that we noticed, is that the podcast actually generates a great deal of trust.
Yeah.
A lot of my questions come from my podcast, or come from the guys in my course on my Discord server.
Interesting.
And the guests that I have on.
Dude, you know what you should do is you should clip the Dan Bilzerian podcast and then either on YouTube ads or on the IG story ads, basically run it and say, if you like Dan Bilzerian, you like what he has to say about this, then it shows the clip.
Yeah.
And then it's like, if you want to see the rest of the podcast, click here and subscribe.
Yeah.
And then you can basically hijack his following into your podcast.
Yeah.
And then essentially like they'll nurture in their buy.
To a certain extent, we did that because I posted 10 reels.
Oh, nice.
And 10 TikToks from that interview. And the other thing is like, Dan is a good friend. He and I are very aligned in certain beliefs. We have very, very common beliefs, especially when it comes to psychology and human behavior. We're almost identical beliefs.
Right.
So that's the reason why that also works really well. It's not just that I had him on the podcast. It's just that there's things I've been saying to my clients for 2 years, and then Dan, without any prompting whatsoever, basically recited everything I talk about in the book, The Setup.
So there's an alignment there.
Yeah, for sure, especially with him, and to a certain extent with Tai. With Tai, it was the same thing, sort of like a cult-like following. When I had Tai Lopez on, and Tai, I don't know if you've seen recently, he's been going on a lot of podcasts recently because I finally got him to come out and do mine. But I also have done more research on Tai than anyone who's ever gonna. I read the first 44 books in his book list.
Wow.
Before I interviewed him, and so whenever I asked him questions, and also I go to his house and hang out with him. So it was one of these things where my interview was different than anyone else's. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're providing more value.
For sure.
Novel concept, but you provide more value, you get more value in return.
Yeah, if you listen to my interview with Bilzerian versus anyone else's, no one's even 1/10 as detailed as I am because I was at some of these parties, right? So we would talk about things that had happened, and every girl he mentions in the book, Lindsay Palis, Hannah C. Palmer, Lauren Blake, all these girls, they're all friends of mine. Like I know every one of them. I know Sophia Beverly, and I'd message someone and be like, hey, can you tell me something about this experience or whatever. So it made my interview a little bit different than other people's. In your situation, I might have Nick Cosman or some other people. Like I'm asking Greg O'Gallagher questions. I'm going to get questions from Nick Cosman, like stuff like that. I try to connect all that stuff together and try to make a little bit more informed. Because I see guys go in there and they're just wing it. You know what I'm saying? They just start asking questions.
Yeah,
and they just wing it. And I don't want to do that. I want to have 50 questions for everyone I interview.
You're prepared. Well, I think also by the nature of preparing, you kind of bring yourself up to speed to where even if you don't go off the prompts, you're kind of like you're able to be more present and have a better conversation because of the preparation.
And also, there's a bunch of stuff I need to learn from you. There's a bunch of stuff I need to learn from Nick. There's a bunch of stuff I need to learn from Ty.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stuff I need to learn from Wes. There's a bunch of stuff I need to learn from Brad Lee. There's a bunch of stuff I need to learn from Jay Cutler. I changed my workout because of Jay Cutler, and I put on like 7 pounds of muscle.
Wow.
Jay Cutler taught me some great stuff just from. I changed my rep sets just from the stuff he was teaching me. So that's the other part of it that was just so important to me, is that like I get the benefit of doing this also and asking these questions.
Yeah.
My clients are going to love this. Anyway, I want to say thank you to you guys. For instance, Also, for those of you who are interested in the Men of Action Mentoring Program, please check out the link down in the description. If you guys want to learn more about social networking, if you want to learn more about status, because like we say, status is status is status, not one type of status or another type of status. It's all the same thing. If you guys want to learn more about that, please check out the thing below. Also, you want to check out him on, it's Cole Thomas Gordon on Instagram. You want to check out closer.io. Is there any other place that you're posting stuff? I know you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, YouTube, Cole Gordon. There's some good stuff on there.
There's some really good stuff, man. You break down some really good.
My standard of like the content I'm going to put out is so high that like it keeps me from putting out content because I'm like I got to prepare for this.
It makes it hard, but like all the stuff, all the questions I had today were from when we were watching about 20 YouTube videos. So you guys definitely make sure you guys check that out. I have some pretty interesting guests coming up in the next couple of weeks. But you listen, I'm going to have some models on. I might have some adult actresses on, but I'm also going to have people in the self-help community that are. If you guys are listen, if you guys are interested, this is the reason why I did this. For those of you who are confused, this man right here, this is your business goes to 7 or 8 figures. If you don't understand what the thing holding you back is, for the most part, it's not the product, it's your sales. That's why I wanted to have Cole on here, because like Nick and Cole both said, it's the ability to sell is that single one skill, not 11 skills, one skill that you can go, oh, okay, I want to sell insurance, I want to sell annuities, I want to sell real estate, I want to sell whatever. You can take that skill and you can pivot that skill into so many other areas and pivot that into financial security, right? And then the commitment to that skill gives you options. So I'm really glad that Cole came on today. And guys, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you all next week.
We'll see you guys.